I never imagined I'd be competing with a ghost. But there I was, lying in the same bed where she once held him, where she still clutches his memory. Every night I hear his name, Kevin, whispered in the dark, cutting through my heart like a blade. She says she's with me, but in her mind, she's still with him. How do you fight a dead man? How do you win back a love that's already buried? Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. By the end of the weekend, Wendy had more pictures taken with them than with anyone else, even me. In fact, there were far more photos of her and them than of her, me, and my own family. Among all the pictures, the ones where she was holding a photo of him bothered me the most. You might not know who I'm talking about. When I say she or her, I'm referring to my wonderful wife, Wendy. When I say them, I mean her former in-laws, Ed and Joanne Parmelli, and when I mention him, I'm talking about Wendy's first husband, Kevin. The pictures I'm talking about were taken on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day with Wendy. Kevin and Wendy were the classic high school sweethearts who stayed together through college at Bemidji State University and eventually got married. They had what many would call a perfect marriage, growing closer each day. They were admired by everyone around them and had the kind of love story that felt like it was straight out of a movie. Kevin was the ideal American boy. He was good at everything he tried. In high school, he was a star athlete and led every team: football, ice hockey, track, and baseball. Kevin was well known in Red River Falls and continued to shine in hockey at Bemidji State, becoming one of the best forwards on the team. If Kevin was the ideal American boy, Wendy was the ideal American girl. She was athletic like him and became the goaltender for the Bemidji State women's hockey team. In her senior year, she set a school record for the fewest goals allowed and helped take her team to the Women's Frozen Four, where they just fell short. It was a running joke at Bemidji State that only Kevin could score against her. Kevin graduated with a degree in business and went back to Red River Falls to work as a personal banker and financial planner at Wells Fargo. Wendy earned her degree in modern languages with a focus on Spanish. She taught Spanish to freshmen and sophomores at Red River Falls Community College and also offered English classes to help the growing Hispanic community there. Both Wendy and Kevin were beloved and admired as a couple, making everyone around them envious. They had a bright future filled with adventures ahead. You could just feel it. But life can be unpredictable. After about 2 years of marriage, Kevin started to face some serious health issues. It all began with a series of colds and other sicknesses that took Kevin a long time to get over. Just when he seemed to be recovering, another cold or flu would strike, leaving him feeling weak for even longer. People were puzzled. How could someone like Kevin, who was usually so healthy and strong, suddenly become so sick? Eventually, his doctor decided he needed to stay in the hospital. They ran many tests to find out what was wrong. Kevin looked much the same on the outside. He hadn't lost much weight or strength, but he just couldn't seem to get better. Then the doctors at Holy Family Medical Center delivered the heartbreaking news. Kevin had cancer. Specifically, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer often makes someone look fine on the outside while causing a lot of pain inside. A person can appear healthy while actually facing a serious illness. Sadly, this type of cancer has a very low survival rate, with most people not living long after they notice symptoms. A scan showed just how serious it was. Kevin had cancer spots in many places, including his brain, lungs, liver, spine, and kidneys. This was discovered before he could even start his first treatment. The medical team at Holy Family quickly sent Kevin to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. For a while, the doctors were able to help him manage the disease, and he seemed to improve. Yet, after his last treatment, new signs of cancer appeared in his lymph nodes and bone marrow. Even with the best care, Kevin's condition got worse. He passed away just 3 days before their third wedding anniversary. Wendy was heartbroken. The loss of Kevin felt like losing the dreams and hopes they had for the future together. She described that when she saw him one last time, she didn't just see him. She felt the loss of all the future moments they would never share. Thinking about the children and grandchildren, they would never have made her pain even deeper. It took her about 6 months before she felt ready to return to work, and even longer before she started to feel like her old self again. Counseling and support helped her during the hardest days, but she still found herself crying at night, often holding a treasured photo of Kevin. Ed and Joanne Parmelli also felt deep sorrow at the loss of their oldest son. Even though Ed and Joanne had 4 other lovely children, Greg, Bobby, Melinda, and Nate, they found it hard to cope with the loss of their beloved son. To help with this, Ed and Joanne gave Wendy a lot of love and made her feel special during family gatherings. Ed worked hard to keep Kevin's memory alive, often sharing stories about Kevin's success in sports, his dreams for the future, and the close bond he shared with Wendy. As time went on, people started to notice that Ed's strong focus on Kevin made things difficult for the other Parmelli children. Greg, Bobby, Melinda, and Nate seemed to feel left out by the constant remembrance of their brother. This made it tough for them to fully enjoy their own lives and achievements. Greg and Bobby, who were close in age, had a strong connection. They found comfort in the attention that was directed toward Kevin and often spoke highly of him, helping to keep his memory bright. Melinda, their only daughter, stood out with her elegance. While her brothers were typical athletes, Melinda had a grace that caught everyone's eye, making her shine like a star. The youngest son, Nate, had a unique style with his Western clothing and loved to wear his favorite boots and hat. Despite his cowboy look, he was the stage manager at Red River Falls Community College. He managed to land this job and did very well. Nate also earned a degree in fine arts, focusing on theater from Macalester College in the Twin Cities. Looking back, I now see signs on my wedding day that warned me about the challenges I would face ahead. I never thought much of them at the time. Although I couldn't be betrayed by someone who had passed away, what I experienced later felt similarly difficult. My name is Jack Fitzgerald. When I married Wendy Parmelli, I was a lieutenant with the Red River Falls Fire Department. I had wanted to be a firefighter since my kindergarten days when my class visited the fire station for Fire Prevention Week. I was completely fascinated. I graduated from Red River Falls High School about 7 years before Wendy and Kevin. After high school, I went on to St. Cloud State University, where I earned a degree in public safety administration with a double major in fire science. I also trained to become a nationally registered EMT paramedic. Once I graduated, I took and passed the written and physical tests to join the Red River Falls Fire Department. I was at the top of the list for a job and was offered a position as a probationary firefighter when a spot opened up. Red River Falls Community College had just begun a program for students who wanted to earn an associate's degree in fire science. I, along with a few other fire instructors from the fire department, was part of the teaching team. I taught a class called Fire Science 215, which focused on building and fire codes. It was during this class that I met Wendy Parmelli. I was truly amazed when I first saw her. Her bright red hair and striking blue eyes, along with her many freckles, made her stand out. I was really taken by her presence. Wendy didn't smile a lot, but when she did, it felt like everything around us lit up. She was tall, about 5'9", and had a fit and athletic figure. I was nervous about asking her out. An English teacher at the college had told me about Wendy's difficult past and the loss she faced when her husband passed away. Hearing about what she went through at such a young age touched me deeply. I saw her almost every day at the college. One day our eyes met and I smiled and waved. To my surprise, she smiled and waved back. Even though we didn't speak that day, I felt happy for a long time afterward. Suddenly, I couldn't stop thinking about her. We often passed each other at the college, exchanging smiles and waves over the course of several weeks. Knowing what she had been through, I realized I couldn't be too forward. I was worried I would be turned down right away. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry for long. I usually didn't eat in the college cafeteria, but one day I had no choice. My teaching schedule often clashed with my work at the fire department, so I was in a rush to grab a quick lunch. To my surprise, Wendy made the first move. She came over and sat at my table while I was eating. She reached out her hand and said, "Hi, I'm Wendy Parmelli." I shook her hand gently. "I see you around, but we haven't had a chance to meet." I tried to be gracious, especially since she caught me mid-bite. "I'm Jack Fitzgerald," I managed to say after swallowing my food. It was a relief I didn't choke. We shared friendly conversation as we finished our lunch. I was so taken by her that I lost track of time, and soon nearly 2 hours had gone by. I realized I was very late getting back to the fire station. I knew my captain would not be happy about my delay, but I didn't care much since Wendy and I had exchanged phone numbers and made plans to get coffee soon. It was definitely worth any trouble. We took our time getting to know each other. Most of our early dates took place during the day in public places like the mall, local museums, restaurants for lunch, bike rides, nature walks, and afternoon movies. Wendy often shared her thoughts about Kevin, and I listened as she talked about her hopes and concerns regarding their past together. After nearly 4 months of casual dating, Wendy finally allowed me to give her a gentle goodnight kiss after an evening out with dinner and a movie. I walked her to the front of the small house she shared with Kevin, held her hand softly, and leaned in for a sweet kiss. I promised myself that I wouldn't rush anything and that I would wait until Wendy was ready, even if that meant waiting until we were married. Wendy and I had been dating for almost a year before we discussed marriage. I began the conversation by asking if she thought about marrying again someday. To my surprise, she said yes, and shared that she could see a future with me too. Hearing those words made me really happy. From that moment, our relationship grew stronger. She still talked about Kevin and her past with him often, but instead of feeling sad, it seemed she was able to think of him fondly, realizing she was still young with her own bright future ahead. We continued dating for another 6 months before I felt ready to ask her a big question. By then, it had been 3.5 years since Kevin's passing. I chose one of our favorite parks overlooking the Red River Valley to propose. Wendy said yes right away, and I felt overjoyed. After agreeing to marry me, Wendy had a couple of requests. She wanted me to ask her father, Mike, for his permission, and she also wanted me to talk to Kevin's parents, Ed and Joanne, for their blessing. Asking Mike for permission to marry Wendy was a simple task. I had connected well with Wendy's parents, Mike and Christy, when I first met them. However, my interactions with Ed and Joanne were not as easy. They seemed cool and reserved, and it was clear they saw me as an outsider, perhaps someone who would change what Wendy and Kevin had together. That was never my intention. I tried to get to know them, but they remained polite but distant. They didn't show much interest in talking to me at social events we attended, whether at Mike and Christy's home or at the Parmelli's gatherings, where Wendy was often invited. I got along reasonably well with Greg, Bobby, and Melinda, but Nate, the youngest of the Parmelli family, was a bit harder to understand. He often had a sly smile, as if he knew a secret that I didn't. I sensed that Ed and Joanne were hoping Nate would somehow reunite with Wendy and bring her back into the Parmelli family. When I arrived that important night at the Parmelli home to ask for their blessing for Wendy and me, Ed Parmelli looked stunned. He and Joanne didn't say anything at first. The quiet was heavy. Ed slowly got up from his chair, went upstairs, and shut the door behind him. Joanne tried to gather her thoughts and said, "It's nothing personal, Jack. You seem like a nice guy. We just want what's best for Wendy." I didn't know how to respond to her. The next day when I saw Wendy, she asked how it went. I struggled to find the right words, so I simply said, "Ed and Joanne want you to be happy." It wasn't exactly untrue, and Wendy looked satisfied. All of this led to our big wedding day, which should have been the happiest day of my life. We followed the tradition and waited to take photos until the wedding was over and before the reception. I should have realized something was off based on all the pictures Wendy had taken with Ed and Joanne. Ed was dressed in a tuxedo, almost like he was the father of the bride. Strangely, her actual parents, Mike and Christy Hasseman, didn't seem to mind at all. I quickly felt out of place at my own wedding. I enjoyed my first dance with Wendy. It felt magical, as if we were the only two people in the world for a few moments. Then the father-bride/mother-son dance happened, and Wendy danced with Mike while I shared a dance with my lovely mother, Sandra. My father, Jim, watched with a proud smile. He would dance next with Wendy. But I was shocked when the next dance was announced, a special dance just for Wendy and Ed Parmelli. I felt embarrassed watching my new bride dance with the father of her late first husband. I also felt guilty for feeling that way. Ed and Wendy were clearly sharing an emotional moment, with tears in their eyes as they danced. Over the next few hours, I only managed to dance with my new wife twice before Ed stepped in each time. I let him take those dances, not wanting to cause a scene at my own wedding. Finally, the reception and the dancing came to an end, and Wendy and I were able to escape to our private suite for the night. I felt nervous knowing we were going to spend our first quiet moments together, hoping to forget the frustrations of the day and truly connect with each other. Wendy came out of the bathroom wearing a beautiful outfit that looked wonderful on her. Her presence drew me in like nothing else, and I found her truly charming. Her bright red hair seemed to shine as it fell softly over her shoulders. She tried to be confident, but it was clear she was just as nervous as I was. She took my hand and led me to the bed. I was dressed comfortably, feeling a mix of anticipation and excitement. I planned to keep the bedside lamps on, wanting to enjoy this lovely moment, but Wendy suggested turning off the lights to make it feel more relaxed. Soon, we were filled with emotion and connection, sharing this special time together, allowing our feelings to grow. My heart raced with the surprising turn of events. We shared a long kiss before she guided me to lie back, settling herself close beside me. It felt sudden, but I hoped it would be the first of many sweet moments we would share that night. As we continued, she paused for a moment and exclaimed, "Oh yes." Establishing a steady rhythm, it was clear she was at ease, and she soon got lost in the joy of our time together. In the soft light, I could see her silhouette, and my focus stayed on cherishing this moment with my new wife. I was pleasantly surprised by how calm I was. Wendy became more enthusiastic, leaning back and expressing her joy, her excitement growing again. She leaned against me, whispering words that were hard to understand at first. "Oh, wow, yes, you make me feel so good. No one makes me feel like this," she shared, breathless. I responded to her enthusiasm, and our movements matched, taking us both to greater happiness. But then something changed. "Oh my gosh, you are so wonderful. Oh, I love the way you make me feel, Kevin." I froze, my mind racing at the unexpected name. "What? What's wrong, babe? Why did you stop?" she asked, still eager to continue. Did you just call me Kevin?" I asked, confused and surprised. "What? No. Why would I do that?" I turned on the light and noticed a light sheen of sweat on her brow. "Yes, you did. Was there a reason you wanted the lights off?" "Oh, no. Why would I think that? I got caught up in the moment." "Wow, you just did it again." Now I'm confused. I know who I'm with now, Jack." She turned away, clearly frustrated. "Thanks for ruining this moment." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I heard what I heard. Maybe it was a mistake, but it happened. And I want you to know that I will always be sensitive to your past marriage because you both deserve that. But I also need to feel like a priority in your life." "You are, Jack. You truly are. I'm not sure why you thought I said Kevin's name, but I understand why it would bother you." She turned towards me on the bed and settled close. "Look, it's been a long week leading up to today, and it's been a really tiring day for both of us. Maybe we should get some sleep first and continue this later, okay?" She gave me a soft kiss on the cheek. "Sure. There's nothing like waking up to warmth." I quickly put on my boxers, feeling a bit shy. I turned toward Wendy, who was close to me, and switched off the light. That night, I didn't wake up with any special feelings. I barely slept as my mind went over the day again and again. I had to accept that we didn't finish that important moment together. Even with her kind words, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still holding on to memories of her late husband. Wendy and I didn't have much time for a honeymoon. We decided to wait until the end of summer for a trip when our work schedules worked out better. The week after our wedding was busy with me moving out of my old apartment and settling into the house with Wendy. Looking back, one of my early mistakes was agreeing to move into the home that Wendy and Kevin had shared. Wendy had made many good points about why it made sense for me to move in with her. From the moment I moved in, I felt out of place in the house. When we were dating, I hadn't spent much time there. All the furniture was what they had chosen together. Even the bed in the master bedroom was the same one they had shared. I tried to encourage Wendy to think about new furniture and decorating the home in a way that felt more like us as a couple. But Wendy often reminded me how much she and Kevin had spent on their things and how replacing everything didn't seem practical. She also pointed out that my income as a firefighter wasn't the same as Kevin's as a personal banker. So, to my regret, I went along to keep the peace. I held back my thoughts and kept my worries to myself. I did all this because I truly loved the woman I married. A few awkward days passed after we got married and settled in before we tried to connect emotionally again. This time it felt slow and caring, and I finally felt like I was building the bond with Wendy that I wanted. Thankfully, her past wasn't mentioned this time, making for a more positive experience. The only thing that bothered me was Wendy seemed really focused on the moment, not just because of desire, but to ensure we would have a better time than on our wedding night. I felt she hadn't found that time fulfilling, maybe because she was trying so hard to make it special for me. On one hand, I appreciated her efforts. On the other, I couldn't help but feel that her actions came from obligation rather than real passion. I knew she remembered what we had talked about before, and her way of trying to move past it without saying anything made me feel even more uneasy. One week after our wedding, Wendy and I were invited to a barbecue at Ed and Joanne Parmelli's home. All of their family would be there, including Greg, Bobby, Melinda, and Nate, along with Greg and Bobby's kids. Honestly, I didn't want to go, but I knew I couldn't argue, so I kept my feelings to myself. I brought in the pistachio salad Wendy had made and tried hard to act like a good guest. Ed and Joanne greeted Wendy warmly, wrapping her in hugs. When Ed turned away to look after the grill, I turned to Joanne, shook her hand gently, and said, "Thank you for having us." She smiled politely and then went outside with Wendy, both of them chatting excitedly. Once in the backyard, Greg Parmalee, who was just a year younger than my brother Kevin, greeted me. "Hey, Jack," he said, reaching out his hand. "I'm glad you and Wendy could make it. Want a drink?" Sure. What do you have? Coors, Bud Heavy, or Bud Light? Choose one." "Bud Light would be great." Greg handed me a bottle, and I stood there listening to him and Bobby talk about the grain market, which I didn't really understand. They both worked in farming sales, Greg for John Deere and Bobby for Monsanto. Their discussion was serious and important to them. I quietly stepped away from them and wandered around the backyard, watching the kids play on the trampoline and swing set. After a while, I felt a bit strange just standing there, so I moved back to the patio where the other adults were sitting. When the burgers were ready, Ed called everyone to the table. To my surprise, there were only enough seats for Ed, Joanne, Wendy, Greg and his wife Samantha, Bobby and his wife Tabitha, Melinda and her fiancé Reese, and Nate. I awkwardly had to sit at a picnic table with the 4 kids. To add to my discomfort, I noticed Nate glancing over at me with a smirk. Deciding to skip the rest of the beer, I accepted an invitation from Greg and Bobby's kids to join them on the trampoline and give them a push on the swings. We played tag and kickball in the big backyard. The last few hours of the gathering flew by, and the kids kept me busy. As Wendy was hugging everyone and saying goodbye, Greg Parmelli's young son Tyler came up to me and asked to be picked up. He was a sweet little 3-year-old with messy light brown hair. "Thanks for playing with us, Uncle Jack." "You're welcome. I had a lot of fun." "What did he just call you?" asked Ed Parmelli. "Did he really say to call you that, Tyler?" Everyone fell silent. "Come on, Dad," Greg said softly. "He's just a kid." Ed shot Greg a look of frustration, then turned to me and Tyler. "Jack is your friend, Tyler, and he's Wendy's husband, but he's not your uncle." Little Tyler looked confused. "Does that mean Wendy isn't my aunt anymore?" "No, Aunt Wendy will always be your aunt." "But Jack," he said, looking at me. "Well, Jack will never be your uncle." After that, he walked inside the house. Everyone was quiet, and even Nate, who had been smiling before, looked away in embarrassment for his dad. I patted little Tyler on the back, thanked him again for playing, and returned him to his father. "Come on, Jack," Wendy called. "I think we should just grab our things and leave." Wendy and the rest of the Parmelli family hugged again. Some of them seemed like they wanted to say something to me, but no one spoke up. They were likely too worried about what Ed Parmelli would think. Wendy and I drove home mostly in silence. Finally, as we got closer to the house, she said something. "Ed Parmelli is a great man and a wonderful father, Jack. You just need to give him some time. He'll come to know you the way I do. He'll come around, I promise." I parked my truck, a 2012 King Ranch Ford F250, in the driveway and didn't say anything. Wendy squeezed my hand reassuringly before getting out of the truck. As I walked into the house, the awkward afternoon played back in my mind like a movie. I suddenly felt out of place in what was supposed to be my home with Wendy. I realized that the only real things I had brought with me were my stereo and my clothes. We, which meant Wendy, had decided that none of the furniture I had from my old apartment matched the house. So it was currently in a rented storage unit. I longed to just relax and watch a game in my comfortable recliner, which I had only bought a year ago. Wendy's house, though I still couldn't think of it as ours, had a finished basement. It was supposed to be a workout room, but I thought it would make a nice personal space. I had to work a 24-hour shift at the fire station the day after the gathering at Ed and Joanne's house. On Monday morning, I drove my truck to the storage unit and picked up some furniture. I got my big TV, my comfy sectional sofa, and my favorite recliner. I also grabbed my foosball table and a used pool table with help from my friends at the fire station. Wendy was busy with her summer classes and meetings at Red River Falls Community College that day. By the time she got home, I had set up the basement to make it feel like my own space. I put up all my Minnesota Vikings and Minnesota Twins posters, and I even added a few items from Bemidji State, even though I don't follow college sports much. When Wendy got home around 4 p.m., she was surprised to see my friends there and what we had done with the basement. She stood still, taking in the sight of everyone playing pool and foosball and the replay of a Twins game on TV. I showed her the new decorations, and she smiled politely at the Bemidji State flags alongside the Vikings and Twins stuff. After a moment, though, she covered her mouth and went back upstairs. I wasn't sure at first, but it looked like she might cry. My friends noticed, too. "I guess the fun's over, guys," I said. They nodded and left, and I thanked each of them for their help. Once they were gone, I headed back into the house feeling a bit heavy inside. I found Wendy in the kitchen, quietly eating a banana and reading the newspaper without looking at me. Finally, she spoke. "I see you did all this down here without me." "Wendy, I can explain," I said. "Really? Can you? I thought we agreed on keeping things the same in our home." "I didn't change everything. The upstairs is still just like it was. The basement was empty. I just needed a little space for myself." "But you didn't talk to me about it, Jack. You just went ahead and did what you wanted. You never asked if I had any plans for the basement. Do you know how hurt I feel? This has been my home for almost 6 years, and you take over without asking." I thought, "This was my home too," I replied. "It is. But that doesn't mean you can decide things without talking to me, Jack. I just wanted to bring some of my things that are special to me. Everything in the house was yours before we got married. I didn't have anything here that felt like mine. I just wanted to get some of my things. I wish you could see that." "And I wish, Jack, that you could see how upset I am," she said. She got up from the table and went to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I took that as a sign that she didn't want to talk anymore. An hour went by. I felt hungry and decided to make some dinner. Even though it was summer, I quickly cooked some spaghetti, made garlic bread, and prepared a salad. I gathered my courage and knocked on her bedroom door. "You can come in," she said, sounding distant. She was lying on the bed with a book. Wendy really loved Isaac Asimov's stories and had read all of his books many times. "I made some dinner if you want to join me. Just spaghetti, bread, and salad." "I thought you might be hungry," I added. Wendy looked up from her book. She put it down and quietly walked to the kitchen. She took a plate and filled it with spaghetti, grabbed some bread and a bowl of salad, and carefully carried the food back to her room, closing the door behind her. It was clear to me that I would be eating alone tonight. I felt deeply sad. I had acted earlier because I felt out of place in the house, which I really was. I just didn't understand it then. I ate my meal in silence, knowing that Wendy wouldn't forgive me anytime soon. After I finished, I cleaned up the kitchen and put away the leftover food. When it was around 9 o'clock, I knocked on the bedroom door. When Wendy didn't reply, I slowly entered. I saw her dishes stacked on the nightstand. Wendy was already asleep in bed, and it was clear she was still upset. I cleaned up her dishes too. After watching a late-night show, I decided to call it a night. I grabbed a blanket and a pillow from the hall closet and made my way downstairs to the room where I had struggled that day. Less than 2 weeks into our marriage, and I found myself sleeping on the couch. The next morning I woke up early and thought it was a good day to go for a run. I was outside for almost 2 hours, which was probably too long since I hadn't run much since spring. But it helped me clear my mind. By the time I got back, it was only 7:30. To my surprise, Wendy had already left for work. Even worse, she had written a note and left it on the table. "Babe, I left early for a meeting. We need to talk and work some things out. I'll be home in the afternoon. W." As the day went on, I started to prepare myself for the talk about the space in the house that had made me feel so uneasy. One part of the house I could call my own was the one place where I didn't feel like someone was always watching me. True to her word, Wendy came home right at 2:30. She changed out of her work clothes into a light sundress, and I have to say, she looked really nice in it. If she hadn't been upset with me, I would have handled things differently. She started talking about the man cave and reminded me that we had agreed to make decisions about decorating the house together, not just by one of us alone. "What about all the furniture in the bedrooms, living room, and kitchen?" I asked. "What about it, Jack?" she replied. "Wendy, I never got to choose whether I wanted to keep that furniture or how the rooms should look. You just wanted everything to stay the same." "What would be the point of getting rid of perfectly good furniture that fits the house so well?" she said. "There's nothing wrong with my things either. I picked out good stuff for my apartment." "Yes, but those things gave off a bachelor pad feel. Everything in this house was chosen by a couple in love. It shows that two grown, caring people live here." I wasn't making much progress. "This is hard for me to say. I really don't want to hurt you, Wendy. But I need to believe that as a married couple, we can be open with each other." "Of course we can, Jack." "All right, then. Here it is. This whole house still feels like it did when you and Kevin were here. Now that I'm here, I can't help but feel that there's nothing here that represents me. I feel a bit out of place. That's why I wanted to create a space in the basement. I thought I could keep everything upstairs as it was and have a little corner for myself." "This is your home, Jack. I know it might feel strange, but it will become familiar to you just like it did for me. It's the two of us living here that makes it a home, not just the furniture." I felt a sinking feeling in my heart. "What did you just call me?" Wendy suddenly looked sorry. "I'm sorry, Jack. I was just thinking about Kevin for a moment. It was an innocent mistake." "Just like what happened on our wedding night," I reminded her. "Jack, that's not fair. I honestly don't remember saying that." I looked away, feeling a bit shocked. Wendy reached out and touched my arm gently. "Look, we haven't even been married for 2 weeks yet. I don't want to start our life together by fighting like this. I'm okay with letting the man cave stay for now. Is that fair?" I was still affected by what she said earlier, but I accepted her gesture because I was tired of the arguing too. Maybe things would get better, and I would get used to everything in time. After all, it was just belongings, right? We decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, enjoying the simple joy of holding hands and chatting about light topics that didn't focus on furniture or her past life. I surprised her by cooking beef stroganoff for dinner that night. Being a firefighter means you learn to cook because it's needed. If you can't cook well, you quickly have to learn, or you'll disappoint your hungry co-workers. Wendy guided me to bed after I dozed off during the top 10 list on television. There wasn't any closeness that night, but it felt nice to share the bed with my wife again. The next day, I went to work at the fire station, which turned out to be quite normal. When I returned home the following morning, Wendy had left me a note telling me where she was and what she'd be doing that day. She also mentioned that she planned to host a family gathering that Sunday at our home, inviting her parents, my parents, and my sister Jane. To my surprise, Wendy also invited the entire Parmelli family. I knew right away that I was in for another busy day. Thankfully, I still had my man cave as a place to escape if needed. One nice thing was that while I was working at the fire department, Wendy went to the furniture store and bought me a recliner that looked almost like my favorite one. It matched the rest of the living room furniture and even had cup holders. Wendy moved Kevin's recliner from the living room to our spare bedroom for now. On Sunday, guests started arriving around noon, and I played host, greeting everyone as they walked in. My parents, Jim and Sandra, were among the first to arrive, and I gave them a quick tour of the house, while Wendy's family came in on their own. I had just finished showing my parents the upstairs when the whole Parmelli family arrived. Ed and Joanne took a quick look around the living room and noticed that Kevin's chair was gone. "That's not Kevin's recliner," Ed said with surprise. "What happened to his chair?" Wendy bought me that a few days ago," I explained. "The other recliner was moved to the spare bedroom, which Wendy also uses as an office." I avoided mentioning that it was Kevin's chair. "Really? There wasn't anything wrong with that chair. No need to move it," he mumbled. Ed and Joanne, you remember my parents, Jim and Sandra?" "Oh, yeah," Ed said, somewhat distracted. Nice to see you all again. Dear, he said to Joanne, let's go to the kitchen and see Wendy. As they left, my dad gave me a look that seemed to question Ed's attitude. I tried not to make a big deal out of it, but I felt a bit uneasy about the fact that Ed and Joanne chose to sit at the kitchen table. Our home has a pretty open kitchen that also serves as the main dining area with just a small breakfast bar. Ed quickly took a seat at the head of the table, claiming the space, which was a bit frustrating for me. The rest of the Parmelli family, Greg, Bobby, Melinda, and their partners, came in to check out what changes had happened since I moved in. Nate was the last to arrive, giving me his usual grin and a strong handshake. It didn't take long for everyone to notice the updates I made to the basement, and soon they started heading downstairs. The 4 Parmelli kids were instantly attracted to the pool table and foosball table, jumping into games without worrying too much about the rules. I didn't want to interrupt their fun. Since I enjoy gaming, I set up an Xbox and a Nintendo Wii U with kid-friendly games on the big screen TV. Greg, Bobby, and Nate spent a lot of time down there, along with my parents and Wendy's parents. The only thing that really annoyed me was the lack of chairs at the dining table, so I decided to eat downstairs with the kids. Luckily, my parents joined us, and we had a nice time watching the kids play. They were clearly having a great time. After dinner, Ed Parmelli came down to the basement, where it was just me and the kids. Greg's kids insisted that I join them for a game of foosball, 2 against 1. Ed looked around at what I had done and frowned. You know, this isn't what Kevin and Wendy had in mind for this part of the house, he said, showing quite a bit of arrogance. He seemed to want me to argue or say something bad about Kevin. I wanted to create a space that's a bit more relaxed than upstairs, somewhere people could unwind. Looks like it's working. The kids are enjoying themselves. And they really were. The basement was lively, with the kids having a blast, and I didn't mind the cheerful noise. Ed took another look around, noticing some of Kevin's things in one of the 2 basement bedrooms, and shook his head. He eventually went back upstairs, and I didn't speak to him again that afternoon. By 7 o'clock that evening, everyone had left the house, with Wendy's parents being the last to go. Even Mike, Wendy's father, praised me for my work in the basement, saying he had a lot of fun that day. I have to admit, Wendy said, your gathering space was a big hit. The kids had a great time, and I can't remember when everyone enjoyed themselves like this. I missed it. Thank you, Jack. She hugged me warmly, showing her appreciation. Wendy then led me to the bedroom and closed the door. I admired her, enjoying the way her red hair flowed and the sparkle in her eyes when she smiled at me. Wendy took my hand and led me to the bed. I felt a mix of feelings as we shared this close moment. We were both at ease and open with each other. Our time together was full of moments of connection, and I felt that we truly enjoyed being with one another. The warmth and closeness between us felt special, deeper than just being together. After a while, we slowly relaxed, letting the stress of the day melt away. In the quiet that followed, I thought about my marriage and the choices I had made. Wendy, feeling happy, soon fell asleep as the night wore on. She seemed to have let everything go tonight, perhaps because I had not interrupted her when she mentioned someone else's name. When I realized she was sleeping, I put on some shorts, took a pillow, and went to the sofa in the living room. Sleep did not come easily that night. I felt emotionally torn in a way I had never felt before. How could I be so in love with someone who seemed unable to fully share that love with me? How do you cope with a partner who is so caught up in memories of someone else while being with me? A line from a movie kept playing in my mind. Would you rather I was calling out his name while being with you, or calling your name while with him? It made me chuckle for a moment, but then sadness washed over me. It seemed I would never fully have her heart and mind to myself. Lying on that sofa, I felt more like a stranger than ever. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I was awakened around 4:30 by her. She was dressed and looked a bit confused as she noticed I was gone. Jack, what are you doing on the sofa? I couldn't sleep. After all we shared earlier, I thought you would have fallen asleep faster than me, she joked. We? What do you mean by that? She looked confused. Who else would I be talking about? You have no idea, do you? She just stared at me. You weren't really with me tonight, I explained. You were thinking of someone else. You called out his name a few times. Even though we were together, I felt far from your thoughts. That's not funny, Jack. I don't remember saying that name at all. Well, I do, and it was clear. Why are you so focused on this? Why do you keep bringing it up? Because it keeps happening. I don't know what to do about it. Look at it from my side. How do I compete with that? I love you more than anything, but it feels like I can never have all of you. I feel like you're still holding on to your past, and it's hard for me to deal with. You're calling out his name while we're together. How can I compete with that? She didn't say much, just trying to find the right words. Finally, she said, I need to rest before work. If you're okay on the couch, stay there. I'm not discussing this anymore. When you're ready to talk, Jack, I'll be waiting for your apology. She walked back to the bedroom and closed the door. I plopped back onto the sofa, feeling frustrated. Sleep was elusive that night. Even though we had been close, Wendy and I seemed to drift further apart. I went to the basement and turned on the TV to catch some sports highlights and morning news. I wanted to give Wendy space while she got ready for work, hoping to avoid more tension. I worked a long shift on Tuesday and spent the next couple of days at home, trying to create peace. I cooked dinner for Wendy when she returned from teaching. When we weren't eating, she prepared for school or spent time in the bedroom reading. I found myself watching TV or playing games in the basement. There were chores I could have done around the house, but I felt too much like a visitor to suggest any repairs. There was a light fixture on the front porch that needed replacing, but Wendy wanted to match it to one she had chosen with Kevin. Every day felt tense, and it was driving me crazy. The only times I felt relaxed were at work or during my daily runs. Running was my escape from our troubled home life. I was growing tired of feeling like a third wheel. Eventually, something would have to change. On Friday, during a 24-hour shift, we got called to a house fire on the northwest side of Red River Falls. It was a small fire, mainly in the living room of a single-story house. After we put out the fire, as I was leaving, the wooden steps to the porch suddenly broke under me. I didn't fall far, but I sprained my left ankle badly. I felt embarrassed more than anything. As a firefighter, I was meant to set an example. Even though I couldn't help it, no one wants to admit they're hurt and can't keep going. I tried to walk on it as best as I could. I soon noticed that my ankle and foot were swelling, making it hard to take off my boot. Before long, I waited too long, and a couple of medics had to cut the boot off, ruining a $300 pair of fire boots. I got a ride in one of our department ambulances to Holy Family Medical Center. An X-ray showed I had a sprained ankle, but thankfully no fractures. However, I was told I needed to stay off work for at least a week, maybe longer. When I finally made it back to the fire station, I got in my truck and carefully drove home. Luckily, it was my left ankle that was hurt, so I could still use my right foot for driving. I pulled into the driveway around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As I entered the garage through the side door, I was surprised to see Wendy's car there. I usually wouldn't expect her home until around 3:30 or 4 o'clock. I tried to quietly make my way into the house using my crutches. I had been injured on the job before and was used to moving around with them. In the kitchen, I couldn't see Wendy at first, but I noticed her car keys and purse on the counter. As I walked toward the hallway leading to our bedroom, I heard some strange sounds coming from there. The bedroom door was slightly open. I realized the sounds were unusual, almost like something recorded. When I got close enough, I saw Wendy lying on the bed with her eyes closed, looking very focused. She was holding something large against her chest. I understood that the sounds I heard were from the TV in the bedroom, featuring voices that were familiar yet distant. Ooh, it feels nice when you're close to me. Yeah? You like it when I'm with you? Oh, yes, I miss you so much. Oh, yes, just like that, my dear. Oh, your presence is wonderful. I can't get enough of it. I was completely captivated by the scene before me. A rush of emotions hit me. I felt a strong sense of longing and almost the urge to cry. It was clear that Wendy was lost in her memories of Kevin, reminiscing about their time together while holding the photo frame tightly. Without realizing it, I had quietly pushed the door open wider to get a better look at what was happening. It felt like I was witnessing another moment that highlighted the changes in what I once thought was a perfect marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling that the past was weighing heavily on me. I was beginning to feel very vulnerable. I was lost in my thoughts when Wendy opened her eyes. She looked around and saw me standing near the door. Surprised, she quickly jumped off the bed and hurried into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. Embarrassed, I turned and made my way to the kitchen and living room. I suddenly wanted a drink, so I walked to the fridge and grabbed a cold beer. I also had some pain relief pills from the hospital that I thought about taking together with the beer. It was over an hour before I heard Wendy come out of the bedroom. Thankfully, the movie I had been watching had ended shortly after I had seen her, and I was relaxing in the new chair she had gotten for me last week. At that point, I had already consumed several beers, and the pain medication was finally starting to kick in. I had ice on my ankle to help with the swelling. Wendy came out wearing her usual robe, holding it tightly as if she needed to protect herself from me. It seemed a bit much, considering what had happened before in our shared history. "How? Are you home?" she asked, trying hard not to cry. "There was a fire this morning," I said, my words a little slurred from the beer and pain meds. "The porch gave way. I fell about 4 or 5 feet and hurt my ankle." I took a long sip of my beer. "I'm sorry, I really am. But why didn't you call me?" "It wasn't a big deal. They just took me in, did an x-ray, and now I'm off work for a week or two with some pain pills." "You should have called, Jack. You definitely should have called." "What? So I wouldn't know what was going on here?" I said, pointing toward the bedroom. "I wouldn't have missed that for anything." My comment made Wendy burst into tears. Even then, I couldn't help but think how beautiful she looked. I felt like a fool for what I had said. Just as I was about to apologize, she gave me a reason not to. "It's your fault," she cried. "What? How is it my fault that I came home and saw my wife in a situation that showed how she felt?" She paused for a moment. "Because it is! Every time we have moments, you think I'm thinking about Kevin. You've mentioned him since we got married. You even brought him up on our wedding night, Jack." "Well, that's because it's true. You've been struggling with what happened to him. I can't help it if you're so caught up in your thoughts that you don't even realize what you're saying. But that doesn't change the fact that I know what I heard." Wendy was crying a lot now and couldn't respond. "Why did you marry me, Wendy? It seems like you're still dealing with what happened to Kevin. What made you want to marry me?" "Because I loved you, Jack. I wanted to be with you for the rest of my life," she cried. "I can't help but notice you used past tense. How do you feel about me now, especially after everything that happened today?" "Does that help you see what I've been saying for weeks?" She was crying so hard that she couldn't find the words. I wanted to comfort her, but I also felt a strong urge to shake some sense into her. However, the combination of the beer and medication was making it hard for me to move. I could only watch, feeling a bit confused as Wendy got up and hurried back to the bedroom. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep, but I could still hear her crying for a long time. I felt so helpless. Even with the effects of the drink and medicine, I managed to get up to use the bathroom a few times that night, feeling the after effects of what I had consumed. I was lucky enough to avoid any accidents and spent a restless night on the recliner, keeping ice on my ankle while dozing off from time to time. When I finally woke up the next morning, I saw nearly a dozen empty cans on the coffee table. My ankle was cold and wet from the ice, but I was relieved that I could stand and put a little weight on it. Wendy came into the kitchen around 10 o'clock, looking calm and ready to go. She had tried to look nice, but her face still showed signs of the emotional stress from yesterday. "I made you some lunch, Jack, and some leftovers for dinner if you want," she said, sounding steady. "Where are you going? I thought we could spend some time together and talk things over." "Ed and Joanne invited me over. I'm going to spend the day with them. I felt let down. I really think we need to talk today, Wendy. Can't you stay with me?" She sighed deeply. "I need some time with people I trust, Jack." "What? Do you not trust me anymore? What have I done to lose that?" "It's not that, Jack. I just need some space today to clear my mind. I think it would be good for both of us to have some time apart to sort through how we feel. Avoiding this won't make it better." "I'm not avoiding it," she replied, gathering her purse and keys. "I think we both need some time to think about our feelings." "I already know how I feel about you, Wendy. I love you and want to be with you. I just need to be sure you feel the same way." "I understand, Jack. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'll be home after dinner. I have to go now." With that, she stepped out the door and into the garage. I watched her drive away, and the house felt lonely. I was stuck there, unable to leave, and had no one to spend time with. It was a quiet kind of loneliness. The only good thing I had that day was a mini fridge in the basement filled with drinks. I had my favorite chair down there and a big flat-screen TV. After a refreshing shower, I decided to spend my day in the basement watching some baseball games and movies. With my hurt ankle, I had to be careful going down the basement stairs. After being alone for a while, I started to feel a bit better and more comfortable with the quiet. I was still thinking about everything that had happened in the last 2 days, but taking this time for myself helped. Besides being a firefighter, I'm also a paramedic and spent a lot of my early career driving an ambulance. I often told my patients that pain medicines do 2 main things. They either ease the pain or help you not worry about it. Sometimes not worrying is just as good as feeling no pain at all. Drinks can sometimes help in a similar way. Wendy didn't come home until almost 9 o'clock. I was still in my chair watching the Minnesota Twins play against Oakland. No matter the score, I was enjoying the game. Wendy didn't say much when she got home. We exchanged quick greetings, and she mentioned being tired from her day and planning to go to bed. It seemed like she wanted to avoid talking about earlier, and I didn't want to push for a conversation. She walked over, said goodbye quickly, and asked if I needed anything before heading upstairs. I said no, and I was left to my own thoughts and the game again. I didn't want to spend another night in the chair, but sleeping in bed felt hard because of the memories from just the day before. So I stayed in my favorite chair, at least with some cold drinks nearby. The next morning, I hobbled upstairs, took a long shower, shaved, and put on fresh clothes. I found Wendy in the kitchen, sitting at the table and eating a bowl of fruit. We exchanged our usual morning greetings, but felt more like formal acquaintances than a couple. I poured myself a big bowl of frosted flakes and sat down at the table with her. As soon as I spoke, Wendy became very serious. "Jack, I need to talk about something," she began, not looking at me. "Good, it's about time." "I know this might be hard for you," she said, and I felt uneasy. "But Ed and Joanne are leaving for vacation this Wednesday. They invited Greg, Bobby, Melinda, Nate, and their families to join them." "Wow, sounds like a big trip. Where are they going?" "They're heading to Hawaii for 10 days. And," she hesitated, "they asked me if I wanted to go with them." I set my spoon down as I took in her words. "Hawaii? For 10 days?" "Yes, Jack. Ed's mother was supposed to go with them, but after having a medical procedure last week, they're worried about her flying so soon. So they invited me to take her place." I knew that the procedure Ed's mother had was quite normal. While any surgery has risks, it wasn't likely to be serious. I guessed Ed and Joanne might have told Wendy that to create an excuse for their plan. They probably wanted her to go to make things more distant between us. "I take it there's only room for one, and I'm not invited," I replied coldly. "You guys at the fire department have to plan your vacations way ahead. You wouldn't get time off on such short notice, Jack." "Yeah, I know that, Wendy. I know you might be upset, but this could end up being a good thing." I could tell even she wasn't sure about that. "So let me get this straight. After everything that happened when I got hurt, you chose to spend your time at Ed and Joanne's, and now when we need to talk and be together, you're going to Hawaii for 10 days, leaving me here to deal with this alone?" "I think we need some space, Jack. We need time to think for ourselves before we can discuss us and our marriage. And you think the best way to do that is on the beaches of Hawaii with Kevin's family?" "Jack, they're still my family too. Just because Kevin isn't here anymore doesn't mean I stop caring about them." "No, it doesn't. And I wouldn't expect that. I just wish you could focus on the family I thought we'd be starting when we got married, as much as you focus on the family you had with Kevin. And we will, Jack, I promise. Once I return home, we can work on things. I know this hurts and feels unfair, but trust me, this time apart might be good for both of us." "Really?" I said, shaking my head. "We haven't even had a honeymoon yet, and you're heading off to the tropics with Kevin's family." "We'll have our time together, Jack. When we have time off in late August, I promise you can take me anywhere you want. Hopefully, by then, we will have worked through our problems." I looked at her in surprise. It felt like I was talking to a wall. Nothing I said was getting through. "I really don't want you to leave, Wendy." She seemed shocked. "Are you saying I can't go?" "No, I'm not saying that. I don't control you, Wendy. I'd never treat you that way. But we're in a delicate time in our marriage and things are tough. As I mentioned before, running away won't solve anything. You'll be away for 10 days, but I will still be here dealing with everything. I need to handle this my own way, Jack." "That's okay," I said, standing up. Just remember that your choices might lead to unexpected results. This situation is showing me a lot about how committed you are to our marriage, Wendy. What do you mean, Jack? Are you saying something? No, not at all, Wendy. You're choosing to step back from our problems for a while, but your choice doesn't decide how I will feel about it. I put my bowl in the sink and went downstairs. The rest of the day, we hardly spoke. I called some friends from the fire department to help me bring my old bed from storage and set it up in one of the empty rooms in the basement. I didn't want to spend another night on the recliner or couch. I also moved my old dresser and my things from the main bedroom into the basement room. Wendy watched quietly as I did this. The next 2 days were very tense. She taught her last 2 classes on Monday and Tuesday, asking another teacher to cover for her afterwards. With the term almost over, her assistant could easily give the final exams for her students. She spent the rest of her time either packing for her trip with the Parmellis or shopping for necessary items. She told her bosses that it was for personal and mental health reasons. Surprisingly, they understood. As her leaving day approached, my sadness and loneliness grew. Greg and Bobby would drive their own families to the Minneapolis airport, while Nate rode with Melinda and her fiancé. Wendy was going with Ed and Joanne. On Wednesday morning, I got up at 6 and saw Wendy just as she was getting ready to leave through the front door. What, you weren't even going to say goodbye? Jack, this is hard enough, and I didn't want to make it harder for you. Once again, you take the easy way out and shut me out. Thanks, I said, trying to keep the sarcasm in my voice light. I'll call you as soon as we land in Honolulu. I promise, okay? I stayed quiet, with tears filling my eyes. I felt like I was watching my whole life walk away. I can't promise I'll be here when you get back, I said. She paused for a moment, then found her courage again. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I meant it or not. I have to go. Ed and Joanne are waiting. She smiled briefly at me before heading to their van with her bags. They welcomed her with cheerful words, excited that she was joining them. My heart felt heavy as I watched them drive off. Once they were gone, I sank onto the sofa and cried for the next hour. The first 2 days without her were really hard. I was so sad and upset that I didn't even pick up the phone when she called to let me know she arrived safely. All I could think about was that my new wife was on a trip with her late husband's family. She was there without me, and Nate, her husband's younger brother, was with them. I had a feeling that Ed and Joanne wanted to bring Wendy closer to Nate since the first time I met them. Nate always had this look, as if he knew Wendy would be part of his life someday. Now Wendy was 5,000 miles away with him and their family, and I realized there was nothing I could do. To keep my mind busy, I tried to stay active while she was gone. My ankle still hurt, but I could walk on it without crutches. I relied on ibuprofen to manage the pain and kept ice packs nearby. I spent time at the Red River Falls Fire Department and worked out in our small gym, focusing on exercises that didn't put weight on my ankle. It would be about a week before I could return to lighter duties at work, and a few more weeks before I could work without restrictions. On the 3rd day, I sensed Wendy was starting to worry about not hearing from me. I wanted to give her a reason to think. She had already made excuses for being away from our marriage while enjoying time with her former in-laws. I thought that if I made things a little less pleasant for her, it might affect her time with the family. By Saturday, I felt well enough to exercise outside, so I went for a long walk. My ankle was sore, but I pushed through a 5-mile journey. As I limped through the front door into the kitchen, I noticed my answering machine had a message. I had a strong feeling the message was from Wendy, and I almost erased it without listening. But my curiosity got the better of me, so I hit play. Hello, this message is for Miss Wendy Parmelli. This is Andrea calling from Northwestern Cryogenics. Please call us at 595-555-9285 when you can. Thank you. Northwestern Cryogenics? What could that be about? I listened to the message again and wrote down the phone number. I quickly called to see if they were open, but they weren't available on the weekend. I decided to look up the company on my laptop. The website was quite basic and didn't give much detail. It seemed to focus on services related to gases and liquids used in cryogenics, like nitrogen, and storing items for medical purposes. I had heard about people choosing cryogenic preservation before, but I didn't think that was relevant to my family since I had visited Kevin Parmelli's grave with Wendy many times. I would have to wait until Monday to call and find out about this strange message. Just then, the home phone rang again, and I picked it up without checking the number. "Jack, I finally found you!" It was Wendy. She sounded relieved, almost like she was thinking, "Great, he's okay. Now I can enjoy my vacation." "Yes, you did. Is there something you need, Wendy? I was just getting ready to take a shower." "Yes, Jack," she said, her voice a bit frustrated. "I wanted to check how you're doing." "Did you really call for that?" I asked, wanting to know if she was just trying to ease her mind while she continued her vacation. "They're not my ex-in-laws, Jack. I never divorced this family. There's a big difference." "Sure, but I doubt Nate sees you as an in-law. He probably thinks of you as a lovely woman far away from home." "Oh my God! Is that what you think? Do you really believe I came all this way to be with my brother-in-law? Jack, Nate is like a brother to me." "You know what, Wendy? It doesn't matter what I think. You've shown me many times that my thoughts are not important to you. So I guess it shouldn't matter to you what I think." I could hear her sigh and get a bit emotional on the line. "Jack, I don't want to argue. I'm going to use this time to clear my head. When I get home, we're going to sort this out, okay? Please, I don't want to fight." "Of course you don't," I thought. "You want to feel good about yourself so you can enjoy your vacation." "Look," she said, "I have to go. We're heading out for a tour of Pearl Harbor. Ed wants to see the USS Arizona. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Okay. I love you, Jack." "I wish I could believe that, Wendy." "Jack, please don't be like this. You're making me sad. Have fun with the Parmellis. Will you talk to me tomorrow?" "I'll be around," I replied. "All right. Goodbye, Jack. I love you." "Goodbye, Wendy." I ended the call. I knew she noticed that I didn't say it back. Maybe that would give her something to think about until tomorrow, if I even decided to answer. I still had a week before she was back, and the longer she was away, the more I was resenting her absence. On Sunday, I mostly relaxed all day. The twins were playing in the afternoon, so I settled into my favorite chair with a mini fridge full of beer. The twins didn't play well, but the cold beer helped ease my feelings about the loss, as well as my sore ankle and my issues with Wendy. I knew we needed to talk things over. Even if Wendy had a good excuse, and I doubted she did, we needed to address her ongoing feelings about her late husband. Thinking about what I discovered last week still made me sad. On one hand, it would have been touching to see her being open and honest about her feelings. It's special when someone can accept their emotions and needs. But the downside was that I felt completely left out. It seemed like Wendy was just using me to hold on to the life she had with Kevin. We had spent more time with Kevin's family since we got married than with either of our own families. That felt pretty disheartening. On Sunday evening, I didn't hear the phone ring upstairs, so Wendy tried to reach me on my cell. I saw her name and didn't feel like answering. I was in a good mood thanks to a bit of beer, and I didn't want to ruin it with another tough conversation. A few minutes after her call, she sent a text. "Don't shut me out, Jack. I needed this time away to think. I also did you a favor by giving you some space." Wow, she really didn't understand. I replied, "You call this a favor? We have different ideas of what favors are. That's like saying cutting off a leg helps with a sprained ankle." She didn't like my response. "You're taking this too hard, Jack. You're making it seem worse than it is." Making things seem worse? What else would you call what I found when I came home from work last week after I was hurt? How would you feel if you found me watching something inappropriate while I was in our bed? We still need to talk about that. It took almost 10 minutes for her to reply. "That is not fair. Yes, I know it must have been strange for you to see, Jack. I can't just forget about Kevin. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed a way to cope. You can't really understand until someone you love like I loved Kevin is gone. I don't expect you to understand, but you can't expect me to just forget either." I didn't even want to reply. I turned my phone off, grabbed a beer, and changed the channel from Fox Sports North to ESPN to watch the Sunday night game. The Yankees were playing the Red Sox, two teams I didn't really care for, but their rivalry always caught my attention. As the pitcher threw the first pitch, I remembered something my dad told me long ago. Never argue with someone difficult. They'll pull you down to their level and beat you with experience. Wendy was taking things to a whole new level. I needed to decide if I wanted to go along with her. I went for a long walk on Monday morning, nearly 10 miles. My ankle felt okay with the brace. It was almost noon when I got home, checked the mail, and went inside. Seeing the home phone reminded me of the message from that Northwestern Cryogenics place. I quickly found the number and called. Northwestern Cryogenics, this is Andrea. How can I help you? She sounded very nice. Yes, my name is Jack Fitzgerald. I'm calling for my wife, Wendy Parmelli. You left her a message this past weekend? Oh yes, Mr. Fitzgerald. I meant to call her on Friday, but I got busy with a meeting. I was in the office for a bit on Saturday and wanted to let her know I had called. I understand. Unfortunately, Wendy isn't here right now and won't be home for a while. Is there a message I can pass along? I'm sorry, Mr. Fitzgerald, but because of privacy rules, I can only speak to your wife. I apologize. I understand, I said, a bit frustrated. I'll try to get her to contact you later today. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. I was still confused. The mention of privacy rules made me curious. As a firefighter and paramedic, I knew a bit about the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It stressed the patient's right to keep their health information private and explained the rules about sharing that information, including consequences for sharing it inappropriately. So whatever Wendy was dealing with at Northwestern Cryogenics, I knew I had to be clever to learn more. Even though I wasn't sure it was a good idea, I decided to act. I called the fire station to see if my friend Monica Banner was working that day. Monica was a firefighter and paramedic who worked on my shift. She was dedicated and a wonderful person, known for her commitment to staying fit and her love for athletic competitions. Monica and I were also close friends, though there was nothing romantic between us. I hadn't really told Wendy how close we were. That afternoon, I visited the fire station. I hadn't heard from Wendy all day, and I figured she was still upset about our earlier text. Monica had just returned from an emergency call and was finishing a report when I arrived. Hey, look at you. It's nice to see you, she said as I walked in. Wow, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were happy to see me, I replied. We chatted for about 15 minutes, sharing small talk about what was happening at the Red River Falls Fire Department. But Monica could tell I had a deeper reason for visiting. So, what's really going on, Jack? How's married life? Noticing the worried look on my face, she grew concerned. Not so great, actually. It's clear I've made a big mistake, I admitted. Monica quickly went to get us some coffee from the kitchen. We settled in a small office to talk. For about 20 minutes, I shared my thoughts while Monica listened closely. She didn't interrupt, just took in everything I shared, even the mystery about Northwestern Cryogenics that was bothering me. So, how can I help? She asked. Well, that's what I wanted to discuss. I was hoping you could pretend to be my wife. Wait, really? Why? I can't talk to anyone at Northwestern Cryogenics without breaking privacy rules. But they might think you're Wendy if you call. I can give you her details to help you sound convincing. I'm not sure, Jack. This seems unusual. Please, Monica. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. My marriage needs some clarity right now. Monica paused for a moment. Okay, Jack, but you owe me a steak for this. Deal. We went downstairs to the basement and used my phone to reach Northwestern Cryogenics. Thankfully, they were still open for another hour. Northwestern Cryogenics, this is Andrea. How can I help you? Yes, this is Wendy Fitzgerald. I got a message to call you? I'm sorry, but I don't see a Wendy Fitzgerald in our records. Are you sure you have the right number? Monica covered the phone with her hand. What should I do? She whispered. Just tell them you're Wendy Parmelli. You got married again. Well, Wendy Fitzgerald is my married name. I'm listed as Wendy Parmelli. One moment, please. We could hear someone typing on a computer. Ah, okay. Could you please confirm your birth date and social security number? Monica gave Wendy's birth date and social security number from a note. Great, Miss Parmelli. I'm calling to let you know that your request has been processed and your package has been sent. It will arrive tomorrow. Ask her for the delivery address, I whispered. Can you confirm where the package is going? Monica asked. Yes, ma'am. The package is going to Macmillan Women's Clinic in Red River Falls and is addressed to Dr. Virginia Howard. Monica looked at me in surprise. Thank you. Can you tell me what's in the package? Excuse me? Andrea replied. The package, Monica continued. What is being sent to the clinic? That was a smart question, I thought. Well, Andrea said, sounding unsure, the package contains 5 vials of preserved samples. Monica's eyes went wide. I felt my face go pale. Can you tell me about the samples? I'm sorry, what do you mean? The samples, Monica said. Can you give me information about them? I hoped she wasn't revealing too much. Miss Parmelli, the samples were donated by your husband, Kevin Parmelli. Monica's face matched my shock. I slouched in my chair at what we just found out. Okay, thank you, she said, her voice quieting. Is there anything else, Miss Parmelli? No, that's all. I'll reach out to the clinic tomorrow, thank you. I pressed the button to end the call. Monica and I exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. Wendy had requested samples from her late husband to be sent to a clinic in Red River Falls. What could that mean? Surely she didn't plan to use them in a specific way. But what else could it suggest? Jack, I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say. I felt speechless. I guess I need to do some more digging. Is Wendy on her own insurance from the college or on our city plan? I thought for a moment. She switched to my plan after we got married. It's cheaper. Can you contact Blue Cross to find out what's happening? If she decides to move forward with this, it needs to go through insurance. Treatments can be very costly, and our insurance has limits on how many attempts they cover. I guess you don't have that kind of money just sitting around, and neither does she, right? Oh, no, I don't. I could never afford that, especially after I put down a big payment on my truck and camper last year. But Wendy might have some savings left from Kevin's life insurance. I know she used most of it to pay off their house after he passed away. If I were you, Monica suggested, I'd reach out to Blue Cross and see if she had that planned. If it's covered by insurance, they should be able to share at least some information with you, right? I don't know for sure. I'd think so, but you can never be sure with these privacy laws, I replied. Monica nodded in understanding. Wow, Jack, this is a tough situation. I know it's still early, but what do you think you'll do? I just sat there shaking my head. I really don't know, Monica. If this is true and she's planning on having a child, then I know we are finished. There's no way I can raise someone else's child, especially one whose father has been gone for 4 years. Monica looked at me kindly, seeming to grasp the weight of what I was going through. The only thing I can do is try to call the insurance company and the clinic tomorrow. Honestly, Jack, I'm not sure what to say. I'm at a loss for words. Yeah, me too. I should go and try to clear my mind. Jack, we're off tomorrow. I don't have any plans. If you need help, I'll be there for you. Thanks, Monica. I might really need that. I'm here for you, Jack. That's what friends do. I know, Monica. Thanks so much. We both stood up, looked at each other for a moment, and then shared a firm hug. I held on as tight as I could and tried not to cry. I lost. Monday night brought only a text from Wendy. Is now a good time to talk? I couldn't believe she texted me to ask if we could talk. Why not just call? What's so hard about that? I thought about the strong Wendy I had fallen in love with. Even though it likely meant a tough conversation, I wished she would come forward and address all the issues in our marriage. If you have to text me to check if it's okay to talk, then maybe it's not okay. Enjoy your time with Nate and the rest of the Parmellis. I didn't hear back from her, so I took it as a sign. The next morning, I met Monica at our local Starbucks. I got a tall black coffee and she ordered tea. We found an empty booth in a quiet corner. Are you sure you want to do this, Jack? Yeah, I nodded. I need to know what she's up to. My goodness, Monica said as she began dialing the clinic. This whole situation feels like something from a really bad TV show. Tell me about it, I replied. I keep expecting tickets to a talk show to arrive in the mail. We both listened to the phone as someone answered. Macmillan Clinic, this is Stephanie. How can I help you? Yes, this is Wendy Parmelli, Monica said. I'm calling to confirm my appointment with Dr. Howard. One moment, please, Stephanie responded. Yes, Miss Parmelli, you have an IVF consultation with Dr. Howard scheduled for next Tuesday. I'm sorry, Monica said. Could you repeat that? It's for in vitro fertilization, right? Even though she knew it, Monica still sounded shocked. I just closed my eyes, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. Ma'am, are you still there? Stephanie asked. Yes, I'm here. Is there anything else you need? Monica glanced at me for help. I silently mouthed the word insurance to her. Oh, yes, Monica said. I was wondering if this will be billed to my insurance. I have Blue Cross through the city of Red River Falls. One moment, please. I'll check that, Stephanie replied. After a brief wait, she said, It looks like this is being billed through a private payer. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that. Can you tell me who it's being billed to? Monica asked. Did you not arrange this payment, Miss Parmelli? Yes, I did, but I want to make sure everything is right, Monica said, sounding a bit annoyed. Stephanie seemed doubtful. Sure, Miss Parmelli. Can you verify some information for me? Absolutely. Please confirm your social security number, your insurance provider and plan number, your home address, and your home and mobile numbers listed on the account. It is not billed to your insurance provider, but I need this info for identification. I can do that, Monica said with relief. She read everything exactly from the notes I had prepared for her the day before. Thank you, Miss Parmelli, Stephanie said, sounding pleased. According to the account, prepayment for the consultation and procedure has been made by Mr. Ed Parmelli. I felt a wave of frustration. I quickly tried to compose myself as I noticed everyone in the coffee shop looking at us. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate your help, Monica said, taking my hand for support. You're welcome, Miss Parmelli. We'll see you next week. Oh, Jack, I don't even know what to say. Let's just go. We left the Starbucks and walked back to my truck. I was doing my best to calm down. My marriage felt like it was falling apart. The woman I thought I would marry had other plans. She wanted to use her late husband's preserved sperm to have a child, and Ed and Joanne Parmelli knew about it. I felt shocked and betrayed. We drove back to the fire station in silence so Monica could get her car. When she got out, she turned to me and said, Hey, Jack, want to come over for a bit? I can make some coffee and we can sit and talk. I shook my head. Thanks for the offer, Monica, but I need to head back and figure some things out. What's your plan, Jack? I sighed deeply. First, I need to call my old landlord and see if I can get my old apartment back or something similar. After that, I'll move my things from Wendy's house and pick up my stuff from storage. Monica nodded. Jack, she said, a bit hesitant, keep me updated. Let me know how you're doing, and if you need help, I'm here for you. I promise I won't say a word to anyone. I appreciate that, Monica. Right now, besides my family, you're the one person I can rely on. Of course, she replied with a smile. Monica is a bit of a tomboy, but has a kind personality. I usually avoided dating anyone I worked with, especially if they were in a junior role. But if I ever thought about breaking that rule, Monica might be the one. There was just one little issue. She seemed to be a lesbian. After leaving Monica, I called my old landlord, Kendrick Realty and Management. Sadly, my old apartment was already rented out. However, Allison Kendrick, the vice president, knew me and offered me a great deal. Since no ground floor units were available, she offered me a second-floor apartment for the same price I was paying before. This was fantastic because my old place was a one-bedroom, and the second-floor units are all 2 or 3 bedrooms. The one she proposed had a poolside entrance and was 3 bedrooms, saving me about $300 each month. I arranged to rent a small U-Haul for one night. I was sure I could move all my things from Wendy's house and then go back for my items in storage. True to her word, Monica came to help me move and even brought some friends along. Luckily, they were people I didn't know very well yet. I wasn't ready to talk about my broken marriage with my fellow firefighters and medics. Even though I knew they would be kind and understanding, I worried they might keep their distance. Firefighters and police officers often pull away during tough times like divorce, and I didn't think I would be any different. Around 1 o'clock, we were loading my big couch into the U-Haul when my phone buzzed. I looked and saw it was Wendy calling. I let it ring a few more times before I finally answered. Hello? Good morning, Jack, she said, pretending to be upset. Is it? I hope so. Last night didn't sit well with me. I didn't like how it ended either, Wendy, but I'm not happy with how today is starting. Jack, I really needed this time apart. It helped me clear my mind and focus on what matters. My phone buzzed with more calls and texts from Wendy wanting to talk. I really didn't want to speak with her. I just wanted to focus on getting everything packed up and moving on. The house had never been mine. I was just a guest there, surrounded by memories. We took my belongings back to the same storage unit where they had come from when I was trying to make some space in Wendy's home. The storage place also had a large lot where I kept my camper. Calling it a camper is a bit of an understatement. It's a big 35-foot Coachman fifth-wheel trailer that I bought along with my truck. I enjoy traveling and exploring new places. The fifth wheel is why I got my F-250 truck. Once I took everything back to the storage center, I connected the fifth wheel and drove to Gallagher State Park. It's a lovely place by the Red River with lots of trees, pretty views, fishing areas, and nature paths. GSP has a great camping site and RV area with complete services, including waste disposal. A yearly membership was just $1,500, which is a good price. I was happy to find that they still had a free lot. Rich Sherman, the park ranger, allowed me to rent the lot for the rest of the season for only $500. This meant I needed to take it out by October 1st to avoid the full season fee next year. Some people bought and traded campers and seasonal memberships just like buying houses. There are some trailers and fifth wheels that haven't moved in 10 or 15 years or more. It was time for dinner by the time I finished setting up the fifth wheel and connecting the electric, water, and waste lines. I was glad I didn't have to think about my clean water and waste tanks or find a dump station every few days. A nice fire pit was between my lot and the one next to it, along with a picnic table provided by the park. I set out some folding chairs, decided to start a fire, and planned to roast a couple of hot dogs for dinner. Maybe I'd treat myself to a s'more or two later. As I settled into my comfy chair with a drink in hand, I took out my phone and saw that I had missed over 30 calls from Wendy and nearly 45 text messages asking me to talk to her. The last message said, "Please don't let the day end without talking to me, Jack." I wasn't ready to talk to her. I hadn't thought to turn off my phone's GPS tracker before, but I did now. I doubted Wendy would try to find me since she was far away in Hawaii, but it was better to be safe. Before turning off my phone, I sent her one last message. "I can't talk right now because I'm not sure what to say. I feel so hurt. It seems like losing you shouldn't hurt this much since it feels like I never had you at all." Just as I was about to turn off my phone, it buzzed. "Please don't shut me out, Jack. It isn't what you think. I can explain everything. We need to talk. If it's too much to talk on the phone, we can at least text." I replied, "I'm too upset for this conversation right now. I was really tired from all the stress of getting hurt at work and now dealing with this situation. I needed some good sleep. It didn't make sense to talk when we were so far apart." "Good night," I said. She replied, "I'm coming home tomorrow on the first flight. We will sort this out. I shouldn't have taken this trip." That was exactly what I was thinking. I knew she wouldn't like my response. "Don't rush home. I've already moved out and found a new place to stay. I'm not ready to deal with this. Coming home early won't make things better." I ended the call and plugged my phone in to charge for the night. After eating a couple of hot dogs and having a beer, I spent a few hours listening to music and enjoying the warmth of the fire before going to bed. I decided not to shower and just climbed the stairs into the front cabin and settled onto the big bed. With 4 slide-outs on my Coachman fifth wheel, the space felt roomy, and that made me feel the weight of my solitude. At that moment, I knew it was better to be alone than to feel unhappy in a marriage where my wife still missed her late first husband. The music played softly while I lay there. I'm a big fan of classic rock, and the song "One" by Three Dog Night started playing. 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. 2 can be as bad as 1. It's the loneliest number since the number 1. Yeah, that felt like my life right now. That night I managed to sleep well. I think it was because I was in a place that felt truly mine, without needing to compete for attention. The only thing I wished for was a pet to keep me company. The next morning, I spent about 3 hours swimming and taking a long walk on the trails at Gallagher Park. It wasn't until around 10:30 that I realized I hadn't turned my phone back on. Just to be safe, I made sure the GPS tracker was off. One of the first things I saw was that my voicemail was full, and I had more than 30 text messages since I last spoke to Wendy. They were typical messages from a worried spouse, words of love and claims that I had misunderstood everything. According to Wendy, this was all just a mix-up. I read her last text from the night before. "Booked a flight, land at MSP tomorrow at 5 p.m., back in RRF around 9. Please be home. I love you, Jack." Just as I was about to clear my messages, my phone buzzed again. "Getting on the plane now. On my way home. See you soon. United Flight 5549 if you want to meet me at MSP." I really hope to see your face first, Jack. She sure knew how to pull at my feelings, and I had to admit that. I decided to stay near the campground for most of the week before returning to my apartment. But it hit me that I needed to talk to my parents about what was going on with me and Wendy. My parents had just retired and were enjoying their time, so I knew they would be available. Sure enough, when I called, my dad answered. He could tell something was wrong right away. He invited me over for dinner that night, and I told them I had some important things to discuss that they might not want to hear. I arrived at their house around 5 o'clock. Dad was waiting for me on the porch. Jim Fitzgerald, my dad, was about 6'1" and weighed around 220 pounds. He was proud of his Irish roots, and celebrating St. Patrick's Day was a big deal for our family. The three things he cared about most were his family, his old job, and Notre Dame football. My mom, Sandra, was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked in. She also noticed something was off, especially since Wendy wasn't with me. I hadn't told them that Wendy had taken an unexpected trip to Hawaii with the Parmellis. "You look a little off, Jack," my dad pointed out. "If I look as worried outside as I feel inside, then you're probably right." My mom left the stove and joined us. "I've got a brisket in the oven. Are you hungry, Jack?" "I'm always hungry for your cooking, Mom." "I see you're limping a bit," Dad said. "Yeah, I had a rough day at work last week. I fell and sprained my ankle pretty badly." "Oh no, were you hurt badly?" My mom often worried about small things. "Well, there was a fire, but I'm okay. Just an old house with a weak porch. It could happen to anyone. It's just a sprain. I'll be back to work soon." "I worry about your job sometimes, sweetie," she said gently. "Really, Mom? It's not a big deal. I'm fine." "Well," my dad chimed in, "something is clearly bothering you. You look like you have a lot on your mind." "I guess that's true." "Then tell us. What's going on?" I sighed. "It's about Wendy. Ever since the wedding and moving in together, we've been growing apart. Nothing feels right, and I feel like our marriage is struggling before it even starts." "Uh-oh," my dad said, getting up from his chair. "Looks like we might need something to help us with this chat." He went to the fridge and grabbed 2 bottles of soda. "Want one?" he asked my mom, who shook her head. She rarely drank soda. I took a sip of my drink, thinking about why I still chose my usual kind. I waited for a moment and then said, "I think Wendy and I might be splitting up." "Wow, Jack," my dad replied, worry showing on his face. "You haven't even been married for 2 months. What happened?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Come on, Jack. You didn't come here just to chat about the weather." "It's just that, I don't know, Dad. I feel like Wendy still hasn't moved past what happened with Kevin. She spends so much time with the Parmellis that it seems like she cares more about them than about me and even her family." "But Jack," my mom interrupted, "you can't expect her to cut ties with them. They were important in her life. You can't ask her to forget those experiences." "I don't want her to forget. I just wish she would focus on our family as much as she does on the Parmellis." "Does this have anything to do with Ed Parmelli?" Dad asked. "It has a lot to do with Ed. He hasn't been very nice to me since Wendy and I started dating. I really don't want to be around him." "Yeah, he wasn't friendly when he came over," Dad noticed. "Exactly. The house doesn't even feel like mine. Wendy was unsure about me bringing my things into our home when we got married. I put some stuff in the basement to make my space, and Ed was not happy when he saw that." "But it's your home too, Jack. You need to stand your ground on some things." "I know, Dad. But whenever I try, it seems to push Wendy farther away. Like you said, I think she sees it as me trying to interfere with her past." "I noticed the wedding pictures," Mom said. "Yeah, that's another thing. Wendy put up our wedding pictures, but she still has all her photos with Kevin on display, and they are all above ours." "That doesn't necessarily mean much," Mom said. "No, but it feels strange. I often feel like I'm not as important as Kevin's memory. I can't seem to stay on Wendy's good side, and things with the Parmellis are becoming harder." "Where is Wendy right now?" Dad asked. I didn't answer right away. "Well?" "She's coming back from Hawaii right now." "Hawaii? What was she doing there?" my mom asked sharply. "She took a last-minute trip with the Parmelli family. Ed's mom was supposed to go but couldn't because of a recent health issue." "I think it was just a way to get Wendy to join them." "And she went without you?" "I really tried to talk her out of it, Dad. But with everything else going on, she said she needed to go for us to have some space. At least, that's what she said. Personally, I think she just wanted to enjoy the past with the Parmellis. I believe that Ed and Joanne would be pleased to see their son, Nate, get closer to her. He's their only single child left." My dad leaned in and asked, "You mentioned everything else that happened a moment ago. What else has gone on since you got married, Jack? At that moment, I felt myself starting to break down in front of my parents. It was hard, but I began to tell them everything. I talked about the family picnic at the Parmellis where I felt left out, even by Wendy. I mentioned how she called out Kevin's name during our quiet times together. I even told them I saw her remembering moments from her past with Kevin. Both of them looked shocked and upset when I revealed that Wendy seemed to want to start a family with Kevin's involvement when she returned from Hawaii. It took me nearly 20 minutes to share it all. When I finished, my dad leaned back and let out a long sigh of disbelief. Mom just sat there, looking at the table in surprise and worry. After a few awkward moments of silence, Mom finally spoke. "Jack, you know we will stand by you no matter what. I truly hope for the best for you and Wendy, but maybe she needs your understanding. She might need to know how hard it is to lose someone you care about." "Yeah, that's a valid point," Dad added. "What did Wendy say when you mentioned Connie?" Suddenly, the little confidence I had from opening up vanished. I hadn't expected the conversation to go this way. "Well," my dad prompted, I never told her." My dad looked at me in disbelief. "What? You never told her about Connie?" "Oh, Jack," my mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "Why would you hide that from her, sweetheart?" "I guess I just didn't want her to think it would be a problem." "Jack," Dad said, sounding serious, "how did you think it wouldn't be a problem?" "I don't know, Dad. I just didn't want her to think I was stuck in that part of my life." "You're 35 years old, Jack. You were 22 when it happened. If someone is stuck in the past, that might be you." I just didn't want Wendy to think I was still affected by it, Mom and Dad. "You weren't over it, Jack. And I have to tell you something. If you plan to bring up this issue with Kevin, you need to be ready for her reaction when she finds out you didn't share this with her." The pain from my struggling marriage with Wendy, mixed with memories of Connie, hit me hard. I started to cry, feeling overwhelmed by emotions I hadn't felt since Connie's funeral. My mom realized there wasn't much she could do except come over to share my sadness. My dad sighed, leaned forward, and held my hand. "I don't tell you this enough, Jack. I love you very much. You have a tough situation right now. I wish I had answers to help, but I don't. You should be honest with Wendy. Let her know how you feel and talk about Connie too. That way she will understand what you're going through." I spent the rest of the evening with my parents. We talked more about Wendy and me, but mostly we enjoyed being together. As I get older, I've come to see that my parents may have more days behind them than ahead. I realized I don't spend enough time with them, and I might regret that in the future. No matter what happens with Wendy, I was determined to change that. When I got ready to leave my parents' house that night, I realized I shouldn't drive because my dad and I had shared a few drinks. My mom quickly made up my old room, and I felt how the bed I grew up in was even more comforting than the best hotel. As I tucked myself under an old quilt my grandmother made, I checked my phone one last time and saw I had missed several calls from Wendy. She was clearly back in Red River Falls. The last message I saw was, "Back in town, looking all over for you. Where are you?" I simply replied, "Somewhere safe. Stop looking. I'll see you when I'm ready." The next morning, I went back to the campground and saw that Wendy had clearly been there. There was a handwritten note taped to the door of my trailer. "Jack, please don't run from me. I didn't know you would take my absence so hard. I thought it was best for us to take a break. Now I see I was wrong. You didn't have to move out. I never wanted that. If you won't come home, please at least let me know where you are or tell me a place we can meet to talk. Please don't shut me out. You have nothing to apologize for." "What? Me apologize?" This was frustrating. I tore the note off the trailer door and crumpled it up after reading it. So much for being by myself in the woods. She would probably guess that I moved back to my old apartment complex, but she couldn't know exactly which apartment I was in just yet. I didn't doubt she would eventually find out, but if I was lucky, I might still have a day or two to myself before I had to face her. I packed up my things from the camper after taking a quick shower and tidying up. I made a few phone calls to friends who had gone through divorces and asked for suggestions for the best divorce lawyer in Red River Falls. Everyone agreed. Danielle Nichols was known for her strong dedication to her clients. She was focused and did everything she could for their representation. I called her office at Brown, Graham, Norris, Slater, and Nichols. Although she didn't have much time to meet today, she could set up a consultation for the afternoon. I also had a doctor's appointment that day, where I was cleared to return to my job at the fire department. My next shift was set for Saturday, which was also the day Wendy and the Parmellis were supposed to return from their trip. I wished I could stay alone for 2 days, but I knew that wasn't realistic. After my doctor's appointment, my dad called to tell me that Wendy had shown up at their place about half an hour after I left. Thankfully, I had taken a different way back to Red River Falls and avoided running into her. My meeting with my lawyer, Danielle Nichols, went pretty well. It helped that I didn't want anything from Wendy. I told Danielle that I didn't actually want to start divorce proceedings. I just wanted the option if Wendy didn't think things through. Honestly, I hoped Wendy would reconsider her choices with the Parmellis, but I knew that was unlikely. Rather than go back to the campground, I decided to stay at my new apartment. I needed to start organizing everything so I could feel settled. I spent the late afternoon and evening doing just that. I had left my cell phone in the truck and didn't remember it until about 9 o'clock that night. I had been so focused on sorting things out that I completely forgot about it. I took that as a good sign that maybe I was feeling better emotionally, as if I could work my way through all of this. I quickly got my phone, making sure there was no one around. I reminded myself to try and relax. After all, it was Wendy who wanted to talk to me, not something scary. In a way, the sooner we had our conversation, the better. As soon as I started checking my text messages and voicemails, my wish was granted. There were over 60 messages just from that morning, all asking me to come home and sort things out. The voicemails started off apologetic, but quickly turned to worry, with Wendy wondering if I had run off and wouldn't come back. Since I knew the voicemails would mostly say the same thing, I decided to call her and get it over with. She answered on the first ring. "Jack? Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me." "Oh my gosh, where are you? I looked for you at the campground and at your parents' place. They said they didn't know where you were." "I know. I kept it vague with them about where I'd be." "Where are you? If you won't come home, I'll come to you." "Don't do that, Wendy. I'm not up for a confrontation right now. I just called to let you know I'm okay." "Please, Jack, I need to see you. We have to sort everything out. I didn't mean for it to seem like I was leaving you by going to Hawaii. I just needed some time to think." "How did you think ignoring me for 10 days would help anything?" "I don't know, Jack. I just thought I needed to talk to people I trust, that's all." "Honestly, Wendy," I said, shaking my head, "the problem is right in front of you and you can't even see it. Jack, this isn't about the Parmellis. It's about us. You have to realize that I had a life before you. Kevin's family is still part of my life and they always will be. No one is making you live in Kevin's shadow." "I get that, Wendy. I knew what I was getting into when I chose to be with you. But it's clear that Kevin's family doesn't accept me. This is just part of why our marriage is struggling. And the fact that you would rather spend 10 days with them says a lot about where your loyalty lies." "Jack, you can be so frustrating. This isn't fair. I can't just forget about Kevin and my life with him. You don't know what it was like to lose him and all the dreams we had. You can't imagine how hard it is to see the one you love go away. You don't really understand, Jack. Not until you experience something like that." Her words hurt. I could hear her crying on the phone, and my own tears began to fall. "I understand more than you think, Wendy," I said, shaking. "Much more." Then I hung up. Wendy tried to call me many times in the next hour, but eventually gave up and sent me a final message. "I'm not giving up on you, Jack. Please don't give up on us. You need to understand that my past matters to me. I can't pretend it didn't happen. I know you might not fully understand what I went through, but it will always be a part of who I am. That doesn't mean I don't care about you. I do. We need to talk so this isn't the end of our conversation." I didn't think replying would help, so I ignored her message. Instead, I took a beer from the fridge and settled in front of the TV for the rest of the night, feeling frustrated with Wendy. She just wouldn't see how her past actions affected us. The next morning, I got up early. It was Friday. It was my last day off before going back to work for my first regular shift in over 2 weeks. I was eager to return and find some normalcy again. But when I was actually at work, I often wished for my day off. Life can be funny like that. That morning, Danielle Nichols had some time to meet with me. We sat down and she offered me a fresh cup of coffee. I don't usually drink it, but I didn't want to be rude by saying no. "What do you think you want to do, Jack?" she asked. "Well," I said, pausing, "to be honest, I want to do something to get her attention. I want her to see that the relationship goes both ways. She can leave if she wants, but I want her to think about what that means." "So, if I understand you correctly, you want to send her some official papers, but still keep the option to change your mind before going through with it. Does that sound right?" "Yeah, that's pretty much it." That's actually quite common. Many people in troubled relationships will file for divorce to make their partner realize what's happening. It's a way to show that their actions can have serious effects. Do many of them end up divorced? I'd say it's about half and half, which isn't too bad. For me and my husband, cheating was a deal breaker. Wow! I was taken aback. Danielle was very impressive, both in looks and presence. No offense, but why would he want to do that? Because he could, and a coworker made it easy for him. Sadly, that's not uncommon in this line of work. But we still work together, she said, pointing to his picture on the wall with the other partners. We couldn't find a way to get along personally, but we can still be coworkers. I let out a whistle of surprise. So how quickly can we make this happen? Well, she said, today is Friday, so I can't handle it today, but I can finish things up and have her served on Tuesday morning. Is that okay? That works perfectly. I'm scheduled to work that day anyway. All right, we'll go with that. And just remember, it doesn't mean you have to follow through. If you feel you and Wendy are making progress, you can stop this at any time. I'll only charge you for the hours I spend on it and refund the rest. Sounds good to me, I replied, standing up and shaking her hand. Danielle had a strong grip. The next morning, I arrived for my shift at 8 o'clock. Saturdays are usually pretty relaxed for us. We spend the morning cleaning the entire station and checking the fire trucks and ambulances. The afternoon is often quiet, depending on how many fire and EMS calls we get. Wendy called me soon after I got to work that morning. She wanted to stop by later to talk. I told her no because I was too busy and needed to focus. Honestly, I just didn't want to see her. I had Sunday and Monday off. On Tuesday, Wendy was set to receive the divorce papers. Part of me hoped it would help her see things differently. But I was also worried she might turn to the Parmellis for support. Having two clear outcomes felt better than not knowing what would happen next. I called Danielle on Monday to ask if I could send a letter along with the divorce papers. She said I could include anything I wanted. So I took some time on Sunday and Monday to write a letter about my feelings and how her actions hurt me. I wanted her to know that I understood the pain of losing someone I loved. My dad was right. It was better to share this now than later. I knew the rest of the Parmellis were back from Hawaii, which might explain why I hadn't heard from her. Ed and Joanne were probably telling Wendy to just move on, implying she could do better than me. By the way, did you know Nate is still single? I sat down and wrote this letter. Dear Wendy, if you are reading this letter, you have received the papers for my divorce request. You might think I'm doing this out of anger, but I want you to know it's out of love. Yes, love. I care enough to let you go and be free. I see now that you aren't ready to move on from the life you had with Kevin. You might say otherwise, but I believe this is true. I don't hate you for it, and I'm not angry either. Am I hurt? Yes. I would be lying if I said no. I had dreams I wished to share with you, and I realize now that won't happen. You told me last week that I couldn't possibly understand what you felt after losing Kevin, and you're right. But I do know what it's like to lose someone I loved deeply. Her name was Consuela Ariana de Maradiago. She was from a small town in southern Mexico called Arriaga, where her parents worked at a big coffee plantation. Connie was lucky to get a scholarship to St. Cloud State, where I met her while I was studying fire science and public safety administration. We first crossed paths on a Sunday morning at Mass. She was with her friends, and I was alone. The moment we locked eyes, I felt a special connection. Connie seemed to be everything I had ever wanted in a partner. She had beautiful long black hair, a warm smile, and the most enchanting eyes. Her smile could light up any place. She was determined to succeed, studying English and special education because she wanted to help children, especially those facing challenges. We became very close, like many couples who fall in love. I cared for Connie so much that I felt sorry for anyone who didn't have someone like her by their side. It just seemed sad that not everyone could have a bond as strong as ours. Then I took a test for the fire department in Red River Falls and scored the highest, giving me a great chance of getting hired right after college. Connie applied for teaching jobs in Red River Falls and quickly landed a position helping children with their speech and reading. We were both about to follow our dreams. Before I even finished asking her, Connie said yes when I proposed. I hadn't even knelt down yet. Just 2 weeks into my new job as a firefighter and paramedic, I received a call that would change everything. We suited up, and I climbed onto the back of the engine, heading towards a serious car accident. The dispatcher told us that one car was on fire and a woman was trapped inside. When we got there, the police had saved the driver of one car but couldn't reach the other before it was completely engulfed in flames. I remember hearing desperate cries for help as I rushed from the engine to grab a hose. My heart raced, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was a mix of thrill and fear. The engineer got the hose ready, and my lieutenant and I started to fight the fire. The car was so mangled that I didn't recognize it right away. As we moved around the burning vehicle, soaking it with water, I noticed a sticker on the back that read Viva Mexico, just like the one on Connie's car. My heart sank as I realized it was a tan 1998 Ford Taurus wagon, the same model as hers. Everything felt like it slowed down, and I remember hearing cries, only to realize it was my own voice calling out. The next moments were a blur as my fellow firefighters tried to help me away from the scene and into the back of an ambulance. It was not easy because of my size and the heavy gear I was wearing. They did their best to protect me from the sadness all around. The fire was so strong that Connie could only be identified using dental records and other official documents. I wished I could see her one last time, but the medical examiner and my family, along with my fellow firefighters, stopped me from doing so. At first, I was angry with them, but I have come to see that they wanted me to remember Connie as she was. We had a service for Connie at St. Matthew's before sending her body back to Arriaga to be laid to rest near her family. Unfortunately, her parents, with whom I had a good relationship, refused to talk to me. Her brothers were very upset, believing she would still be alive if she had gone back to Mexico instead of staying with me. No matter how many letters I wrote to say I'm sorry, they have not replied. I have waited 13 years for someone like you, Wendy. Someone who could fill my heart like Connie once did. 13 years. I deserve to have someone in my life who loves me just as much as Connie did. Maybe that is asking too much. Maybe I was just dreaming. Perhaps I should have accepted my situation with you and accepted that my chance at real love had passed. Maybe I need to accept that Kevin will always come first in your life and be happy with what I can get. But I will not. I still believe that I deserve someone who loves me as much as I love her. So I have decided it is better to be alone than to try loving someone who makes me feel lonely. That brings us to where we are now. No doubt you have been spending most of your time with Ed, Joanne, and the rest of the Parmelli family since they returned from Hawaii. I hope your early departure didn't ruin the rest of their vacation. Just make sure they know I didn't ask you to leave, although I doubt any reason you give them will change their opinion of me. Know that I care for you deeply, just as I did with Connie. If nothing else comes from this marriage, I want to thank you for showing me that I am still able to love like that again. Yours sincerely, Jack. I sent the letter to Danielle Nichols by email to be added to the necessary documents. Then I took some time away for the weekend. I stopped by the campground and picked up a tent, sleeping bag, and a few other supplies. I turned off my cell phone and made sure the GPS tracker was disabled. I continued my journey south along the Red River on the Minnesota side and checked out a campsite there, paying $10 for one of the basic spots. I spent the rest of Sunday and most of Monday hiking, fishing, and enjoying some time by myself. I realize it wasn't kind, and I admit that. In trying to avoid Wendy, I may have shown her some of the distance I felt since we got married. I couldn't understand how we had gone from being so close during our dating and engagement to feeling separated once we were married. I thought that being married to me might have made Wendy nervous about leaving her old life behind with Kevin. I couldn't really blame her for that because I had my own challenges getting over Connie and facing the life we couldn't have together. I often thought no one could compare to Connie, but then I met Wendy. I had been away for nearly 2 days and completely out of touch. I missed over 80 phone calls and 150 text messages from Wendy. Most of them were brief, just asking to talk or sharing feelings of love. I thought it was her being worried, even though I hoped she truly missed me. I wished it wasn't just a reaction to the idea that her marriage might be coming to an end. On Tuesday morning, I arrived at the fire station and took my seat as the lieutenant on Engine 1. Everything was normal until about 10 o'clock when my captain came up to me during our morning training and said there was someone who insisted on talking to me. I went to the front office of the station and found Ed Parmelli waiting for me. Oh no. "What is wrong with you, Jack?" he shouted. "Please calm down, Ed. You're in a public place." "I don't care. Wendy is at our house right now and she is really upset. It's bad enough that you changed her life, but did you really serve her divorce papers while she was at work?" I hadn't thought about that. The person who served her must have found her at the college. I didn't mean for her to be served in front of her coworkers, Ed. I just thought she needed to be served. "You're making things worse. Why would you have her served like that? Wendy should be standing up for herself." "It doesn't really matter, Ed. The truth is that Wendy and I getting married was a mistake. I don't need you to remind me of that, so I think you should just go," I said, trying to stay calm. "You're right. It was a mistake, one I tried to talk her out of. It was too soon after losing Kevin. And she deserves better." "Whatever, Ed. You need to leave. You can leave quietly, or I can have my captain call for help." "Fine, I'll go. I just wanted to tell you how I feel. You don't deserve Wendy. You're not even close to what my son was. I'll do everything I can to keep you away from her." Ed stormed out and slammed the door so hard that he cracked the safety glass. "Can you explain what that was about?" my captain, Luke Briggs, asked. "Wendy and I are breaking up." "Really? What happened?" "I don't want to talk about it now, Luke. Let's just get back to training. At least tell me who that guy was. I need to explain to the chief about the door." "His name is Ed Parmelli. He's Wendy's ex-father-in-law." "Jack, I'm worried about you. Do you think I'll be okay?" "Yeah, Luke, I'll be fine. I just want to focus on training to take my mind off things, you know?" "Sure, but if I think you're struggling, I might suggest you take some time off, all right?" "No, that's all right, Luke. I've already taken enough time off. The chief had a tough time a few years ago. He'll understand." "I know, but I'll be fine, I promise." Luke must have told the other firefighters and medics about what was going on. Luckily, no one brought it up to me. They probably understood how I felt. Monica kept her distance since she knew more than the others. I was glad to finish my shift the next morning and relieved to have a couple of days off to think about my next steps. I hadn't heard from Wendy, probably because of Ed and Joanne's influence. I could see them telling her to let me go and move on. I tried not to dwell on those thoughts, knowing they wouldn't help me feel any better. On my drive home, my phone rang. It was Danielle Nichols. Since Wendy needed to reply to the divorce papers soon, I thought Danielle might have some news. I wasn't far off, but there was something unexpected. "Jack, it's Danielle. I have news for you." "Okay, I'm listening." "Wendy has already hired a lawyer, Malcolm Dunkirk. I know him. For an opposing lawyer, he's quite fair." "Okay, what's next?" "Wendy and her lawyer want to meet with you to talk about the divorce." "What? You're not serious?" "No, I'm not joking. Wendy's lawyer said that she's open to agreeing with your requests if she can talk to you directly. Have you spoken to her since she got back?" "Yes." "Did you meet in person?" I hesitated. "No, I've mostly been avoiding her." "If Wendy wants to work with you, I think we should go ahead. Her lawyer wants to meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock at my office. Can you make it?" I let out a breath. "Sure, I'm free tomorrow. I can make it. I guess things are moving quicker than I expected." "Yeah, they might, Jack. If you both agree on everything, you could have your divorce in about 60 days. "Wow. It took almost 2 years to date and get engaged, but now we can finish this in just over 2 months." "I know, Jack," Danielle replied, sounding caring. "But at least you can start to move on with your life." Once I got back to my apartment, I decided to tidy up and then go work out at a nearby gym for a while. Later, I treated myself to a drink and a snack. I ended up at a place in Red River Falls called the End Zone, a local sports bar like Buffalo Wild Wings. The walls had many TV screens showing different sports events. I found a seat at the end of the bar. It was nice because a Vikings preseason game was playing, and they were up against Oakland. I was excited to see how the Vikings would do this year with their new head coach, Mike Zimmer. They had also drafted Teddy Bridgewater, and I wanted to see how he would fit into the team's plans. After last year's tough season, the Vikings had a lot of room to improve. For the first time in a while, I was hungry and decided to try their special burger, a big bacon barbecue burger with jalapenos. It came piled high and had a steak knife in the bun. I also ordered a side of crisp-cut fries and a large beer with a name I couldn't even pronounce. The night was shaping up to be filled with good food, a cold drink, and some preseason football. I was enjoying my meal and the game so much that I didn't notice when someone came up behind me. I turned around and saw the sheriff of Mason County, Sheriff Pat Quinn. Jack Fitzgerald, I thought that was you," he said, smiling. I turned on my bar stool and quickly swallowed a bite of my burger before reaching out my hand. "Sheriff Quinn, good to see you. It's been a long time." "Yes, it has. Just call me Pat. No need to be formal." "All right, Pat," I said with a smile. "Jack, I want you to meet some people. This is my fiancée, Shannon Sullivan, and these are her parents, Jack and Suzanne Sullivan." "Pleased to meet you all," I said as we shook hands. I couldn't help but think about the sheriff's fiancée. If Wendy and I ended up divorced, I hoped I could find someone as lovely as Pat's fiancée. "Everyone, this is Jack Fitzgerald," Pat said, introducing me. "Jack is a firefighter and paramedic with the Red River Falls Fire Department. He was one of the firefighters who helped me on the day I was hurt. He's one of the people who helped me get better." Pat's guests looked surprised by what I said, and his fiancée, Shannon, leaned over to thank me. For a moment, I felt really nice about the whole situation. They all had a lovely aura that made Shannon even more beautiful. Except for Wendy and Connie, I can't remember seeing anyone as pretty as Quinn's fiancée. We stood there chatting for about 10 or 15 minutes until they decided it was time to leave. "We should let you get back to your meal before it gets cold," Quinn said. "It was great to see you again, Jack. Thank you for everything you did for me that day." "I'm really thankful too, but I'm impressed by what you did for that little girl. It's amazing that she will be your daughter now. You're a fortunate guy." "It was really nice to see you, Jack. If you ever need anything, just give me a call," he said, handing me his business card. "Thanks, Pat. I might just take you up on that." "Please do. Take care, Jack." Then the sheriff left to join his family at their car. I returned to my food and drink, enjoying the pleasant atmosphere. With my stomach full and more refreshments on hand, I decided to enjoy my time right where I was. I didn't have to meet Wendy and her lawyer until tomorrow afternoon. As I finished my drink, I started to feel the effects of the evening. Depending on my mood, I can either be really happy or a bit down. Unfortunately, I was feeling more on the sad side. Just as I finished my drink and asked the bartender for another, a breeze came by and a voice said, "I'll have what he's having." I turned to my left and saw Nate Parmelli sitting next to me. "You must be kidding," I said, feeling cautious. "Yep, it's me, Nate Parmelli," he said with his usual grin. "I heard the sheriff say your name, saw you were here, and thought I would come over to chat." "What do you want?" "Well, I heard you filed for divorce from Wendy today and thought you might want to talk about it. You look like you could use a friend, Jack." "Great," I said, sipping my drink. "Let me know when one of my real friends shows up." "Come on, Jack. Don't you see me as a friend? We've never had a reason to argue, right?" "I don't know, Nate. That all depends on what happened in Hawaii, doesn't it?" "What are you talking about, Jack?" "Seriously? You think I don't realize the trip to Hawaii was to keep Wendy away from me for 10 days? Hold on a second, Jack. I had nothing to do with Wendy going on that trip. As far as I knew, my grandmother was supposed to go until we saw Wendy at the airport." "Yeah, right," I said. "I promise it's true. Greg, Bobby, and Melinda didn't know either. It surprised all of us." "Come on. Your family had it planned from the start." "Looking back, you might be right." "I know I'm right. They wanted to take her away from me, send her somewhere nice, and hoped you would bond more." Nate threw his head back and laughed, a real smile on his face instead of his usual smirk. "You know I'm right," I continued. "From the first time I met your family, it felt like they wanted you to step in and keep Wendy close, like it was their wish." Nate laughed a bit longer, then got serious. "Well, Jack, I can't disagree with that," he said, chuckling. "Honestly, my parents would be thrilled to see that happen. But I can assure you, it won't happen." "What? Is Wendy not good enough for you? Do you have someone else? Tired of being in your brother's shadow?" Why was I asking these questions? Was I trying to make him take Wendy away from me? Jack, let me explain. Wendy is amazing, and anyone would be lucky to be with her. But yes, I do have someone else in my life. Just to be clear, I'm not looking for a typical connection. What's wrong with her? I thought she was great. Oh, she is fantastic, Jack. I'm just looking for something different. How can you be okay without that? Well, Nate said thoughtfully, I see things differently than most. Honestly, Jack, you might be surprised to know you have a better chance with me than Wendy does. I almost dropped my drink. Excuse me? Nate smiled widely. Yep, that's right, Jack. I'm not straight. I stared at him for a moment, wondering if it was a joke, but there was none. I mean it, he continued. Look over in the corner. I turned to see a nice young man around 25, sitting there with a friendly face, watching us. That's my boyfriend, Nate explained, genuine affection in his eyes. His name is Wyatt Helms. We've been together for almost a year. If it helps, Jack, I didn't bring him to Hawaii either. Neither did Wendy. As I looked back at him, Wyatt waved briefly at us. Nate waved back with a smile. But when I looked at Nate again, the smile was gone, replaced by a serious expression. I realized Nate was sincere and had shared something important with me. Do you understand now, Jack? I'm not a threat to you when it comes to Wendy. I can't believe it, I whispered, shaking my head in confusion. Sorry, Nate. No offense, it's just hard to understand. I mean, you seem so, well, normal, you mean? Do I come off as not gay? Honestly, yes, you do. Nate laughed. Don't stress about it, Jack. I get that all the time. I was still surprised. I just imagined you differently. You kind of look like a cowboy, you know? Nate chuckled. Yeah, I guess that's my style. Ever since Brokeback Mountain came out, it's been a part of how people see me. When they find out about my theater background, they say, well, that makes sense. But the cowboy look can surprise some. I guess I'm just a cowboy who happens to be gay. I smiled and felt a bit more relaxed. Sorry for thinking wrong about you. No need to apologize. In fact, I'm sorry for judging you too, and I want to apologize on behalf of my family. Speaking of your family, what do they think about you? No offense, but your dad seems quite traditional. Nate took a sip of his drink, collecting his thoughts. Let me tell you, Jack, I love my dad like most sons do. He never treated me badly while I was growing up, but while I love him, I don't really like him much. That was somehow comforting to hear. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dig into things. No, it's okay, you're not prying. People respect my dad, and he has earned some of that respect. But I see his harsher side that others often miss. He's still grieving the loss of his first child, which has affected his joy with the rest of us. He feels resentful that Greg and Bobby have their own families, especially since none of the grandkids are from Kevin. That's why I often felt overshadowed by Kevin, and why my dad struggles to see me and my siblings for who we are. I took a sip of my drink. That makes sense. I see why he wants to keep Wendy close. Whether she realizes it or not, Jack, Wendy needs you to support her. We all do. Greg, Bobby, Melinda, and me. We need you to help Wendy find her own way, away from my parents' influence. I just don't know if that's possible, I admitted, unsure. Listen, Jack, you must do this. You'll be helping Wendy in a way she might not even know she needs. But how can I do that when she's still coping with everything related to Kevin? Wendy has grown since then, Jack. She's stronger than people might think. If she wasn't ready to move forward, she wouldn't have married you. It's been 4 years since Kevin passed. She's been taking steps to heal, but she needs to be independent from my parents. It's vital that you stand by her during this journey. The challenge is, Nate, I still see reminders of Kevin everywhere. Even being married to Wendy and at the house brings back tough memories. It has never felt like home to me. Change that. Put the house up for sale. What my parents don't know is that Wendy wanted to sell it for a similar reason. They insisted she keep it just like it was when Kevin was around, which has made it harder for her to move on. I don't know, Nate. So much has happened. I'm not sure I can keep going or if I even want to. Maybe it would be better if Wendy and I went our separate ways. Please, Jack. I'm asking you not to think that way. My father believes he can control what Wendy chooses, trying to hold on to Kevin's memory through her. But I promise, Wendy cares about you. When she realized you might not be there after Hawaii, she was really worried. She doesn't want to lose you. You don't see it, though, Nate. Some things have happened that are hard for me to deal with. Nate got closer. Look, Jack, if you're talking about what you saw, Wendy told me how she feels. She's confused about her actions. I think the pressure from my parents and the changes in your relationship have made things tougher for her. Wendy said she plans to see a counselor to work through everything. She's trying hard to understand her feelings and what this new stage in her life means. I don't think that means she cares about you any less. That was hard enough, Nate. But what's happening with Wendy is just too much for me. Nate looked puzzled. What situation? What are you talking about, Jack? I sighed deeply and gave Nate a quick summary of Wendy's plan involving Kevin and the idea of raising a child that wasn't mine. Nate listened, and his expression changed from calm to shocked as I finished. No, Jack, that can't be. Wendy would never do something like that to you. I know it. I bet my life that my parents have a hand in this. It's the only explanation. Only my dad could think up something so complex to try to keep part of his son with us. What else could it be, though, Nate? Why else would she and Kevin have considered it? Simple, Jack. When Kevin found out he was sick, he and Wendy knew the chances were slim for a full recovery. They still hoped, but they understood that the treatment might affect his ability to have children. So before he started treatment, he donated sperm to be stored, just in case they couldn't have a child later. So you think your dad might be pressuring Wendy into this? Jack, I wouldn't be surprised if Wendy didn't even know about it. They might have planned to tell her about it after the Hawaii trip, but Wendy panicked and left early. That could explain everything. Your parents set up the whole thing. That's why our insurance didn't cover it. They wanted to keep it private. Are you serious, Jack? Yes, Nate. I had to do some investigating to find that out, even having a friend pretend to be Wendy. Our insurance covers 2 tries, but I need to be informed first. Wendy would never hide that. Nate was quiet for a moment. I could see tears in his eyes. Oh, no, he said. Greg, Bobby, and Melinda will be upset when they hear this. I'm really sorry, Nate, but I still need to talk to Wendy. I get it, he replied. What time and where is your appointment with her tomorrow? 2 o'clock at my lawyer's office. Sounds good, I'll be there. Really? I asked, surprised. Of course, if you want me to be. It's time my dad understood how we feel. All right then, I'll see you there. I reached out my hand for a shake. Instead of shaking hands, Nate pulled me into a big hug. Without thinking, I hugged him back. We held on for a while, and it felt right. Come meet Wyatt now, Jack. I'd love to, I said, picking up my drink and plate. I spent the rest of the evening with Nate and Wyatt in a booth. More of their friends joined us later, and soon I was mingling with a cheerful group. Nate told everyone that he still thought of Wendy as a sister and introduced me as his new brother-in-law. I was touched by that. I enjoyed talking with everyone. I was surprised that no one tried to flirt with me all night. It broke some of the stereotypes I had about gay men and helped me understand myself better. I still had some growing to do, even at 35. I was grateful for the day off that followed since I had quite a headache. Thankfully, one of Nate's friends who wasn't drinking offered to take us home, even though it was a bit out of his way. I woke up the next day just before noon. I still had 2 hours before my meeting with Wendy and her lawyer. It made me feel better knowing Nate would be there. Just a week ago, I'd never have expected to feel this way. After my usual morning routine and a lot of coffee, I started to feel normal again. I chose a button-down shirt, slacks, nice shoes, and a tie for the meeting. I rarely dressed up, and this was about as formal as I usually got. I arrived at Danielle Nichols' office at 1:30, hoping to beat Wendy. Danielle kept me in her office until Wendy and her lawyer, Malcolm Dunkirk, arrived. My parents were already there, waiting in the conference room. I had invited my friends for support, but I knew I might need to ask them to leave if Wendy wanted that. At 2 o'clock, we went to the conference room. I was surprised by what I saw. Wendy was sitting there in a dark blue pinstripe suit. The outfit looked great on her and made a strong impression. Another surprise was that, along with her parents, Ed and Joanne Parmelli were sitting across the table from me. Ed shot me a frown, and I saw my dad give Ed a similar look, knowing how Wendy's former father-in-law felt about me. Unfortunately, I didn't see Nate Parmelli in the room. I felt sad and hoped he would arrive soon. Danielle Nichols sat next to me, and my parents were on my other side. My mom took my hand to show support. Wendy noticed and gave a small smile, trying to connect with me, but I looked away. I was still too hurt. Counselor, you and your client asked for this meeting today. Danielle started. "Would you like to go first?" "Thank you, counselor," Dunkirk replied. "My client wants to see if her husband would consider other options before finalizing a divorce. It seems Mr. Fitzgerald might not have shared important information that could help them work things out." "Counselor," Danielle responded, "my client feels that your client has done things that hurt them emotionally and has not fully committed to the marriage. The proposals made to Mrs. Fitzgerald were fair, considering they are newly married and will only keep what they had before the marriage." "I understand, Miss Nichols," Dunkirk replied, "but my client has said she will agree to those proposals, but only after she talks to her husband about possibly resolving their issues first. Plus, we both know that a judge would likely order counseling if either side asks for it." Danielle looked at me for direction, and I nodded for her to continue. "Very well, counselor. Since your client requested the meeting with her husband, let's hear from her," Danielle said. "Good," Dunkirk replied. "You can go ahead whenever you are ready," he told Wendy. Just then, the door to the conference room opened and Nate Parmelli walked in. "Sorry we're late and for interrupting," he said with a friendly smile. I was confused as he approached Wendy and greeted her warmly, which she welcomed. I noticed Ed Parmelli's expression change, as if he realized there was another supporter in the room. Nate moved around the conference table and sat right behind me. He gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder. I turned to him and said, "Thanks," as we shook hands warmly. Ed's smug smile vanished, replaced by a deep frown. I was surprised when Greg, Bobby, and Melinda walked in and took seats next to Nate. I smiled at each of them as they settled in, and they smiled back at Wendy, who greeted them with a friendly smile. At that moment, I realized this meeting was less about a conflict between Wendy and me and more of a message directed at Ed and Joanne Parmelli. "Jack," Wendy finally said, "why didn't you ever tell me about Connie? Why keep something so important from me?" There was a pitcher of water and glasses on the table, so I took a quick sip and cleared my throat. "Well," I began, searching for the right words, "I knew about your situation and the difficulties involved. I didn't want you to feel that our relationship was only based on shared troubles. I worried you might think I hadn't moved on from Connie. I just wanted you to know that you come first in my life." "But it's such a big part of your past. Didn't you think it would help if I knew about Connie?" "I didn't think so. I managed to move past that pain long ago. I didn't want to weigh you down with it, especially with how she left us. It's been tough for me, and I didn't want to add to your worries. But now we're here, Jack. If we part ways, we may never find out if knowing would change anything. That's why I want us to try to make our marriage work again." "Wendy," I said carefully, "there are bigger issues separating us than just me not sharing about Connie. Are they so big that we can't work through them?" "I'm afraid they might be. I can't forget what I saw when I came home from the hospital." I noticed a pleased look on Ed's face when I brought up Wendy's past actions regarding the video. It was clear he was aware of it. I couldn't understand how he knew, but it seemed likely that Wendy had told Joanne, who then informed Ed. "I can't explain what happened that day, Jack. I regret what I did, and I'm very sorry. Running off to Hawaii was not the right choice." "Yes, Wendy, it wasn't the right choice. Those actions are part of why we are here discussing our divorce. I know it was a mistake, Jack, but it wasn't like you caught me doing something with another man. I realize it was a strange situation, and I need to understand why I acted like that. I'm willing to find those answers with the help of a counselor." I leaned in a bit. "Wendy, finding you in that situation was really hard for me. I believe I can, in time, figure out how to move past that. But what I can't understand is how you expect me to ignore the problem with the samples. I know, that's what I don't get either. I barely heard everything you said on the phone that night. What about the samples?" "Kevin's samples." Wendy looked surprised. "Who told you about them? Does it matter?" "No," she said, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "I guess it doesn't, and the samples aren't really important anyway. I took a sip of water and almost spit it out." "What? They aren't important. How can you say that?" I glanced over at Ed and Joanne, who were fidgeting in their seats as the topic changed. "What difference would it make now? We knew how sick Kevin was then. We wanted to believe he had a chance to get better, Jack. But we also knew that even if he did get better, treatment might mean he couldn't have kids, especially because of the radiation. That's why we had the samples taken, so we could start a family when Kevin got better." I get that, Wendy, I said, keeping my voice even. But why were those samples sent to a clinic here just last week? Wendy looked shocked and confused. What are you talking about, Jack? Those samples are at a cryo lab out west. Honestly, I had even forgotten about them. They were, I explained, up until last week. Those vials are now at the Macmillan Women's Clinic and are with Dr. Virginia Howard, who will perform a procedure on you whenever you decide. Wendy gasped. What are you talking about, Jack? I would never do something like that. Is this a joke? Do you really want to end our marriage so badly that you would say this? Miss Nichols, I said, could you please show my wife the emails from the clinic? Danielle opened her case and pulled out the confirmation emails I had received from the clinic. They explained the procedure, what Wendy might expect, and the chances of success. Wendy covered her mouth as she read through the pages, her expression shifting to one of shock and fear. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. Jack, please, she started to cry. Please tell me you know I would never do something like this. I want to believe that, I said gently, but I also fear that you might be influenced by the wrong people. People who seem to have a lot of power over you. She looked confused. Who? Who are you talking about? I simply nodded toward Ed and Joanne. They both looked really tense. Ed seemed visibly upset, too. Nate, Greg, Bobby, and Melinda looked at their parents with confusion and disbelief. Ed and Joanne? No, they would never do something like this, one of them said. Look at the last page of the emails, Wendy, Danielle said softly. There's a financial statement attached. It shows that Mr. and Mrs. Parmelli have paid for everything in advance. Wendy cried as she shifted her gaze between the emails and Ed and Joanne. Mike and Christy, Wendy's parents, were too shocked to respond. They were trying to understand what was happening. Why would you do this, Jack? Ed Parmelli asked calmly as he stood. Look at what this could mean. Wendy, please tell me this isn't true, she begged. Please tell me you wouldn't want me to do this. Ed stepped closer and held her hands gently. Wendy, Joanne and we wanted to talk to you about this. We wanted you to think about what it might mean for us if you could help. Oh my gosh! Wendy pulled her hands away. You really thought I would agree to this? Wendy, please, Ed said softly, taking a step toward her. Just think about the implications. It could mean that part of Kevin would continue to live. Wendy's father, Mike Hasseman, spoke up. How could you think this is a good idea? It is not a bad idea, Ed insisted. It seems quite concerning, Mike replied firmly. No, it isn't. Why would we have the chance for this if we weren't meant to consider it? Ed argued. Wendy, you've changed, she whispered. This isn't like you. Kevin wouldn't want me to do this. Kevin wanted to live, Wendy. This could be a way for part of him to carry on. He was getting more anxious. How could you think that I would even think about this, Ed? Because you were his partner. You were supposed to be there for him. You promised. This isn't wrong, Wendy. This is a chance to make something right. It was unfair for Kevin to leave us early. This could be a way to extend his legacy. Wendy slowly moved away from Ed, fear showing on her face as he continued to approach. I quickly stood up and placed myself between them, concerned for her. Without realizing it, I held Wendy's hand, and she squeezed it tightly for comfort. Soon, Mike, Christy, my parents, Nate, Greg, Bobby, and Melinda gathered around us, standing together in support. What is wrong with you all? Ed shouted at his kids. Is this how it's going to be? You're all against this now? Is that what you want? Are you really saying that this person can take your brother's place? Kevin is gone, Dad, Nate said, keeping his voice steady. You need to accept that. You can't make everyone else hold on to a past that can't come back. What would you know? You're nothing compared to your brother. He would be ashamed to call you his brother. No, that's not true, Nate said, tears forming in his eyes. You're wrong about that. Kevin accepted me for who I am. He was the first person I told when I felt ready to be myself. He helped me be open with everyone. He never tried to make me hide again. The only one who feels ashamed is you. Greg, Bobby, and Melinda put their hands on Nate's shoulders to support him. I reached out and held Nate's hand. This has to change, Dad, Greg said. We all miss Kevin. You're not alone in your pain. We all feel this loss, Bobby added. You need to let go of the anger. It's only hurting you. And we want you to be here with us, Melinda said, not just for yourself, but for all of us and your grandkids. You have no idea, Ed said, shaking his head as his anger rose. You can't understand. Kevin had a future that was taken away. We need to try to make sense of it. No, Dad, we can't, said Greg. It hurts that he's gone. We're all heartbroken. But this isn't the way to honor him. It won't bring Kevin back. It will only make things harder for everyone. I don't care. I only care about Kevin. Ed looked at Wendy. Wendy, please think about what this means for us. No, Ed, I won't do it. Kevin wouldn't support this. Ed stood there, visibly upset, and then turned his anger towards me. I'll never forgive you for this. Everyone, just leave. He looked at Joanne. Come on, we're going. Joanne stood still, covering her mouth as she held back her tears. Joanne, let's go. Joanne glanced at her kids with a sad look. Then she looked at me and said, I'm so sorry, Jack. You're a good person. No, he's not. He's awful, and you shouldn't even talk to him, Ed yelled as he pulled her arm. Hey, Parmelli, my father shouted. If you talk to my son like that again, you'll regret it. My dad rarely gets upset, but when he does, it's serious. Ed shot one last frustrated look at everyone, then led Joanne, who was crying, out of the room. The silence that followed felt heavy. Wendy broke down in tears and sank into a chair. Oh, Jack, she cried. I'm so sorry. I knelt in front of her and wrapped my arms around her, trying to calm her and let her know everything would be all right. Everyone else joined us in a warm embrace. Oh, Jack, I can't even imagine what you think of me right now. I think you're wonderful. You are the woman I love and want to spend my life with. No, Jack, she shook her head. I'm the one you should be upset with. I didn't want to feel that way, Wendy. I just felt lost. I thought I could never be loved by you like you loved Kevin. I'm so embarrassed, Jack, she cried. Ed was right. He knew how to influence me when it came to Kevin. I let him affect my feelings. Ed was someone who hid his own pain, I said gently. He was right, Jack. If he had spoken to me in Hawaii, he could have convinced me to have Kevin's child. I can't believe I didn't see it before. All the reminders, Kevin's things. Ed could never move on, and he didn't want me to either. It was hard to accept what could have happened, but instead of feeling angry, I held her close. I knew we had a lot to work on, both on our own and together. It's okay, sweetheart, I assured her. It didn't happen. We are going to get through this. We'll work on our marriage and ourselves. If you give me a chance, Wendy, we will come out of this stronger. Will you give me that chance? Wendy looked at me with tears in her eyes, unsure. Are you serious, Jack? You filed for divorce and now you're asking for another chance? My heart raced as I worried she might say no, but she leaned closer, and in that moment I felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. We were going to make it. Everyone else felt it too, and they quietly left the conference room, stopping to hug us as they went out. I looked at Nate Parmelli and whispered, "Thank you," as he walked by. He smiled and winked in return. Wendy's gaze filled me with warmth, a clear sign that she was committed to us. Epilogue. Lot has happened since that day in the conference room, and most of it has been good. Wendy has been promoted to the chair of the Foreign Language Department at Red River Falls Community College. Now she only teaches one class each semester, allowing for more regular hours. She no longer teaches English as a second language, which she misses, but she's been able to include that program in the college curriculum, helping new immigrants earn their first college credits at no cost. Wendy got a lot of attention for her program, and I was really proud of her. Over the past few years, I had been working on my own education. I completed a master's degree in public safety administration and took several courses at the National Fire Academy in Andover, Maryland. I learned about building construction, building codes, fire behavior, and became an arson investigator. Because of this, I was promoted to fire marshal at the Red River Falls Fire Department. Now I had regular work hours, unless there was an emergency, which meant Wendy and I had more time together. Wendy and I each found counselors to help us cope with our grief. Both of our counselors were skilled in this area. Mine also worked with veterans who experienced stress from their service, and I started to see that I had similar feelings. Some were due to Connie's accident, but many came from my years as a firefighter and paramedic. Anyone in those jobs faces many tough situations. My therapist helped me understand and manage my feelings. We also found a great marriage counselor who guided us in building a stronger relationship. One good piece of advice was to sleep comfortably and openly with each other. She mentioned that couples who slept in a relaxed manner often cuddled more. This helped them feel closer emotionally. When they woke up in the morning, gentle touches and soft sounds often led to sweet moments. This closeness made them feel safe and happy together, allowing them to start the day feeling good about each other. We lived separately for about a month. After some counseling sessions, we began to connect and forgive each other. Soon, Wendy started staying over at my apartment. By the second month, she sold her house and moved in with me completely. We chose to stay in the apartment for now and take our time in finding a new home. Ed Parmelli didn't like that Wendy was selling her house, but she hadn't talked to him since their visit to the attorney's office, even though he tried to reach out. By Christmas, the house was sold. Every day, Wendy and I grew closer and felt like the newlyweds we truly were. Wendy decided to give most of her furniture to Nate and Wyatt, who took the big step of moving in together. They chose a nice two-bedroom apartment in our same complex. To celebrate, we had a warm housewarming party for them. Greg, Bobby, Melinda, their spouses, and all the grandkids came. Joanne was there, but Ed did not attend. Recently, there has been some good news on that front as well. Encouraged by friends and family, Ed and Joanne joined a grief therapy group. Ed seems to be starting to deal with his loss and is reconnecting with Greg, Bobby, and Melinda. He's becoming more involved with the grandkids. While he still finds it hard to accept Nate's choices and sees Wyatt just as a friend, things are getting better, and there's hope. No matter what you may think, I truly wish no harm to Ed Parmelli. I understand how it feels to lose someone, and I can't bring myself to hate him for that. On our 6-month wedding anniversary, I grabbed some flowers and took Wendy early to Rosewood Cemetery where Kevin is buried. We placed the flowers on his grave and stood in silence. We had visited many times, but that day I noticed Wendy didn't cry or seem sad like usual. Instead, she smiled at his beautiful headstone and looked back at fond memories. She left a small envelope with a note at the base of the stone. After a moment, Wendy took my hand and was going to lead me back to the truck. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll be there in a minute." Wendy looked surprised. "Are you sure? Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I smiled. "Everything is fine, I promise. I just need a few moments with Kevin alone, if that's all right." "Of course," she said, turning to walk back to the truck. "Kevin, she's truly amazing," I said to the headstone. "I promise to love, cherish, and protect her for all my life. There's nothing I won't do to make her happy. I swear I'll never raise my hand or my voice to her. Your name will always be spoken with respect in our home. I will never try to take a higher place in her heart, only an equal one, and I promise to love her forever. God is my witness, I swear this to you, Kevin." After a few more moments, I turned and walked toward my truck parked down the hill. Standing by it was my wonderful wife, her striking red hair shining in the morning sun. She looked radiant, like something I had never seen before. I walked up to her, wrapped my arms around her, and we shared a sweet moment. "Let's go home," she said. "Home is our special place, filled with love and warmth, where we create lasting memories." It was early morning as we drove away, the sun just starting to rise. The sky was clear and blue and there was no wind. The city was slowly waking up, and the peacefulness reminded me how much we had grown since the challenging days of our early marriage. "I saw you talking to him," Wendy said. "What did you say?" "I told him that I would love you and care for you for all my life, and that he will always be remembered in our hearts and home." Wendy smiled and held my hand tightly. "Do you want to know what I wrote in the note I left for him?" "Only if you want to share," I replied, feeling a little nervous. I told him I was thankful for every moment we had together, and I will always treasure his memory. I looked at her, smiled, and squeezed her hand back. "And I also mentioned that I thought you'd be okay with telling Kevin first that I'm going to be a mother." I was so surprised that I nearly braked hard, but I reminded myself to stay calm. "Easy, Jack," she laughed. "I need to take it slow." "Oh my goodness, you mean you're— Congratulations, Jack, you're going to be a father." She moved closer, filled with happiness. "And just so you know, there was no doctor visit," she giggled. We hugged for a moment before realizing I had stopped in the middle of the road and a car was honking behind us. We both laughed and waved to the driver as he went around us. Thankfully, it was someone I knew and he didn't seem upset. I can't believe this. We weren't even planning for it. And you were on the pill. I know. I guess it was just meant to be. How far along are you? Not too far. Only a few weeks. I should have had my period by now, and I took a test this morning. There was a plus sign. And those tests are supposed to be reliable, right? The box says over 98% accurate. Wow, I'm so excited, but also a little nervous. We need to think about a house, a nursery, baby clothes, and what if it's a boy or a girl? Wendy laughed. I'm pretty sure it's going to be one or the other, Jack. I chuckled at myself. I was thrilled. My heart was filled with love. So what do we do first? Well, she said, we have some time before we need to worry about the big things. But for now, maybe we should start thinking about names. I thought for a moment. If it's a boy, I paused. I think Kevin Fitzgerald sounds really nice. Wendy's eyes grew wide and her face brightened. Really? That's amazing. I was thinking Connie Fitzgerald would be perfect for a little girl. Oh my gosh, we're on the same page. Come on, Wendy said. Drive me home so we can start planning this exciting journey. Oh wow, is this going to bring out your caring side? That would be great. I'm not sure about that, Jack, but you can at least take me home so we can figure it all out together. I laughed. Well, since you put it that way, I see it as a good thing to do. Just adding to your tasks, she giggled. Well, you know what they say. If Mom isn't happy, no one is happy. That's true, Jack. And so we drove home, ready to create many happy memories. Hey, listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.